Hey there, SCP fans. My name is Grigori Karpin, and this is Simply Creative People, the show about SCP creatives, be they authors, artists, or offsite content creators like YouTube and TikTok. We're focused on bridging the gap between various fans and serving as an introduction to different concepts and stories on the wiki. So, many welcomes to all, and let's get started. Well, welcome to Simply Creative People. Today we're doing episode 9, which is all about the whimsy and the wonder of Dr. Wondertainment. I'm Grigori Karpin, as the intro just said, and I'm joined by Mr.
I have been and always shall be Harry Blank.
And today we also have a guest who is kind of an expert on Wondertainment. You want to introduce yourself?
It's me. It's Darkstuff. I'm Darkstuff. Hello.
Hello.
And if listeners aren't aware, Darkstuff has been writing for the wiki for 5 years?
Since
4 or 5 years?
2016.
Oh, so like 6 years.
So 6 years, yeah. Wow. And I've been a lurker for longer than that. I started looking at the site when I was 11 in 2012. So I've been around a long time. I did try to cold post something in 2012. So if you look at the archives, my history on the site is long. But I only started actually like doing real things in 2016.
All of the authors that I have talked to about, that I think that are, really have their shit together, lurked for a while beforehand. Mm-hmm. Although there are exceptions, of course, but like I lurked for years, at least 3 before I even, 2016 is when I first started reading it, and then it wasn't until 2019 when I was like, oh, I could do this.
But lurking's fun.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people who never stop lurking, and
yeah, it's good entertainment, it's fun reading.
Some of my best friends lurk.
Yeah, me too.
It's a treasured pastime, lurking.
In all online fandoms of all sorts.
Yep.
Any forum, any message board, all the way back to the 90s. Lurking is a legitimate behavior.
Uh-huh.
So, every episode we've been talking about our processes, and Harry brought up a really good idea last week about doing our creative stuff this time, and was going to be talking about what we do about what considerations we take into fact when we create a character, different uses that we have for them. And I thought we could each talk about an example of it, and then encourage people to go read our stuff.
Sure. I feel like start.
Go
you go.
What? No. Well,
he never goes first. He's not ready.
He never goes first.
No, I can.
You're the host.
Yeah.
You go first.
Yeah. Be prepared.
Well, the host usually goes last.
But all right.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I have a lot of, we all have a lot of characters that we could draw on for this conversation. But I thought I would talk about Lucretia Popescu, who is she's still Sarkic. She grew up in the shadow of the fighting rings that are detailed around Aurochs Fall, which is SCP-2408. And when I was doing the Canon Renaissance contest with Callie Bold and Nagiros and Red, we were trying to think of anomalous characters that we could either make up or take from other articles that we could use to put together a crack squad of misfits. And I've talked about this before on the show that my knowledge of the wiki is weirdly lacking for somebody who has 70 articles, because I came to the wiki in a very strange way, and it's been very hit or miss how I get involved. And one of the best things I like about doing the show is this forces me to go out of my way to read stuff I hadn't read before. And so I just went with what I kind of knew and was I want to make a character, because that's what I get invested in, is making new characters. And I made a couple, but one of them was Lucretia. And my ethnic background is Romanian Jew, and I like bringing in quite a bit of Romanian sort of characters into my stuff. I've done it before. And she is, at first, kind of a musclehead. She's just there to throw people around. She's got the Sarkic body augmentation stuff going on, but very quickly I realized that the role that she fits and the role that I really like playing with her as is the funniest person in the room. Because she's so constantly looked at like, she's this huge person. She's very much out of the closet. Anytime she talks to a guy who's giving her slightly a bit of lip, she likes to accuse them of like not liking lesbians, which I think is funny, or just like playing off the fact that she is English as a second language, but without. I try never to be writing it like it's punching down. I always enjoy the fact that she has fun with the fact that she doesn't really know English as well as everyone else, and she doesn't care. It kind of happened out of nowhere. Like I talked about last episode that with Harry, that for months in our friendship, I had said, I just wish I could write funny. I don't know how to write funny. And it was Lucretia, I think, that unlocked it a little bit, because I just, with every new article that came out that was part of that contest, I just kept putting her in situations after situation where, yes, she could be deadly serious, but like everyone around her was being deadly serious. And so I just had her start cracking wise, only in ways that really only made her laugh, or in reality made me laugh. She's sitting there and threatening a director's assistant trying to get in, and he's no, you need an appointment. And she's like, what is this, an appointment? You need to make, what is this, a dentist's office? And somebody is like, this isn't really the way we handle this. One of her teammates, and she's like, oh, do you want to make an appointment? Look, assistant right there. And so I just kind of went from there and just found that occasionally I will like unleash her, and she does really horrific violence to people, but most of the time she's the one in the room who is either openly mocking the people that take themselves far too seriously, or just sort of like asking questions in a way that she kind of illustrates the fact that she's had like a really, really rough life coming to this point, and instead of her coming off as the incredibly grim character, I've always wanted to make her just a little bit funny. And Harry, you mentioned, because we're writing the series with her again, His Will Be Done, and Dr. Dan, that like you always reserve the best lines for Dr. Dan, and I always reserve the best lines for Lucretia.
Yeah, Lucretia gets all of the completely confident in who she is and what she's doing, and gives no shit kind of humor, and takes no shit kind of humor, and that works really well. It's like having the straight man character be the funny part, and it works.
Yeah, she's constantly calling like things in the Foundation that are ridiculous, things in the world that she thinks are ridiculous, because she's got this really interesting perspective that she was raised in this essentially like a modern trafficking ring. That's what 2408 is, and like, surrounded by violence, and she could be very serious about everything, and yet it's just her constantly pointing out, this makes no sense. Not trying to do some accent, and I really have tried hard to like not make her sound like Boris and Natasha, like not make her sound at all stereotypical. And I've even had people like take a look at it and be like, well, does this feel right? And just the dialogue and whatnot, and it's just very interesting to me that like I wrote her because I like Sarkics and I think they're creepy and interesting, and I wrote her to be like the muscle on the team, and she is. But she's, more often than not, I'm utilizing her to like crack jokes. And she's like, very useful for that, because I don't usually have everyone cracking jokes. That's not usually the way that I write.
Yeah, that's what I do instead.
Good segue.
Oh, I don't know. It's Darkstuff's job to decide who goes next. If Darkstuff says I go next.
It is. I've gained this title. All right.
You've taken over.
I was just going in the order of how we introduced ourselves. It was Grig, Harry, and me. And so I thought, that's the order. That's the rotation. You go Grig,
you're bringing structure.
Yes.
I get it.
Yes.
Okay.
So Harry's next.
Yeah, we need structure here. I love it.
All right.
Obviously,
well,
Harry's next.
So much for structure, because you talked about your one specific character, and I'm just going to wax with vague generalities instead. When I make characters, it's a very instrumental thing. It's usually that I'm writing something and I need somebody who can fit a particular role, and I haven't got one. So almost all of my characters start as a sideline mention in an SCP that's one line long, because I need somebody who can have had one particular job or do a particular thing, and nobody I've already established has that job. And at that point, the character is just a name. I usually go on behindthename.com and I find an ethnicity that I haven't got represented yet, and I look through the names until I find a surname and a given name that I find are combining interestingly, and that character is now 2 words, and they serve their purpose. And then the next time I need to flesh out a character, I need to put them into something where they're going to actually have some character development. I think, well, do any of my real characters fit in this? And if they don't, I grab one of those people who is just a name, and I give them the chance to become more than just a name. And at that point, I start actually thinking about, like, who the hell is this person? So I have, 4 or 5 characters who have tags. They've been used by enough people to get tags on the site, as does Lucretia Popescu.
She does.
Nice.
And almost all of them started out as one-line mentions. I've got Dr. Lilyhammer, who's my most popular character. I've got people making fan art for her and all kinds of stuff, and she was one line in a long testing log, essentially, of an SCP before I needed to use her for something, and then used her in more. And I think the best example of this is Dr. Weddle, who I designed to be the character who is the idiot, the character who is almost the Law Foundation character, because occasionally you need a researcher to do something boneheaded to advance the plot, and I essentially created a designated butt monkey who is just the guy who is always wrong and is always stupid and is always obnoxious. And I made him that character, and then I started thinking, well, why is he that way? And decided that I didn't care. And that's where the collaborative enterprise part of the wiki comes in, because Grigori picked up on Weddle and started using him in his VKTM articles and expanded that a bit. And then Ip came by, and he had this bee in his bonnet about the fact that I had sent Weddle to S&C Plastics, and he was really antagonistic towards them because that was the joke, and it drove the plot that he was antagonistic. But anything that goes to Sloth's Pit sticks in Ip's mind. So he was really bothered by Weddle, because Weddle is a completely flat character. He is a jerk for no reason. He is an idiot for no reason. He is a clumsy twit for only the reason that I need him to be that. And so Ip started creating a backstory explaining why he was that way, and it actually blossomed into an actual character who has also got a tag because of all the people who've written them. So in a sense, every character I do just evolves over time as I need them to exist, which is why I now have something like 24 characters who I can just pick off the top of my head for pretty much any role. Yeah. and then the ones that you don't find you have a lot to say about, as long as you've said something about them, everybody else will eventually chime in and help you to flesh them out, which is what's great about working in a canon.
Yeah, I loved, Weddle is so much fun because I just enjoyed the fact that he was constantly, not only the one who was constantly wrong in the room, but also just the biggest jerk about it. He just, owns it and, is spitting in people's face, not literally. And I just always, I'm like, he's so much fun, I'm going to put him, because everything that has to do with VKTM is, putting essentially either the Foundation or all of society in their place and, showing them that they're idiots. And I was like, okay, well, it doesn't really fit. At the time, all I had been doing really was my own series stuff, which is fairly dark and, serious. And I was like, it doesn't really fit. Also, my stuff is all set, 30 years ago.
Right.
And I want something that's kind of more universal. And I just started writing it at your site. And I was just like, this fits. You guys talk about memetics. And then I was like, well, Weddle's perfect. And then Lilyhammer's perfect. And so I just kept popping them both into it. Even if it's sometimes just a message that, the only reason that they know about the anomaly is because it showed up on Weddle's computer. And he swears he did not register for this survey. So even in a footnote, I'm like, Weddle's an idiot.
Yeah, and that's the thing about him is that he's so he's like an omni tool for the researcher who does something wrong. So you've used him, Ip's used him, placeholder McDee's started to use him in his Tales series, Archetypicals, and he was my first character to qualify for a tag, my joke character, just because he's deeply utilitarian.
Sounds like a wonder that he still has his job.
Yeah, well, the beauty of it is he has a built-in explanation, because one of the first things that happened to him at work was he got involved with a time loop that happens at the same time on the same day every single year, or the world essentially ends, so he has to be there. So they just let him do replication studies because it's easier to have him work there and make sure he's there on September the 8th.
Yeah, I have one of my favorite lines is both he and Lilyhammer go to a seminar held by Victim. And she's like, I don't even understand why you're here. You do replication studies. And he goes, well, there's nothing more meaningful to like media than replication. And she's like,
True.
ugh. And he's like, what? And she's like, you're just wrong so often that I'm not prepared for when you're right. And they're both so much fun.
They sound fun.
So Darkstuff.
So me.
You've made a few characters.
I have, and some of them have gotten tags also. I think we all have tagged characters. And like getting a character a tag is like, for some reason, just so satisfying.
Yes.
It felt really, I only got the one, but it felt really good.
It feels really good. Getting anything a tag, like starting something and then it gets a tag is like,
yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Validation of your peers.
Validation, it's huge, it's immense. So character creation, character utility. So I've been, as aforementioned, I've been writing since 2016, and so like not only has my writing developed, but like this was happening during also the most developmental period of my life in general. And that's not like a thing unique to me, that's just I was 15 when I started. So obviously, brain changes. So my answer to so basically, what I'm about to say for my process for creating characters does not apply to many of the characters that I have created, because I've created them over this big span of time where my approach to writing has changed. But typically now, characters come from a place. There's two main ways a character can be created. Like a character that I want to follow. I guess this is more for protagonists than utilities. Like the agent that goes and is just a name for the guy who raids a place. It doesn't follow this pattern because I just needed a guy to go do that. But the people who I return to, they're either questions that I want to explore, like philosophical questions, moral questions, how people react when thing happens. Like can a generally good person run an evil company? Was kind of that's like a Cornelius jumping off point, kind of musings on capitalism and the marketplace and companies in general. And so like that's a question. Or the other way that I make a character is to take an aspect of myself to be really explicit with the idea that you can't create a character that isn't a part of yourself. Because I realized that at some point, and I found that very profound for my own approach to writing, that you can't make a character where their thoughts aren't your thoughts. They're just your thoughts tailored to what you need. It's like this person might be the mean piece of shit in this story, but they're your version of a mean pice of shit.
Right.
It has to go through your brain. It's your interpretation. Stuff like that. Totally. And I thought that was really interesting, and realizing how I use fiction to process my own emotions. Like I've used my writing to process the death of a loved one, a family member before, and realizing like, oh, this is it's so expressive. So now I make that very explicit. Like I will take when I develop a character, it's like, what aspect of me is this character? And then once I have an idea, like maybe I didn't have an idea before, maybe they were just a name, but now I'm figuring this out, or I'm creating them wholesale, thinking, okay, what do I want to explore of myself with this character? But I crystallize like well, I think I already said it, what I want to approach. Like Faywin is very much, she's one of my more popular characters, and she is very much an exploration of the intellectualization of issues that I face, where it's like something bad will happen to me. Say, for example, very much connected to what I just said, the death of a loved one. And it's like, it doesn't seem to affect me very much. And I'm like, why? This was a really big thing in my life. And it's like, and I read in a book one time that it's intellectualizing an issue is kind of a form of suppression of emotions, because it's like you don't feel the emotion, you just boil something down into the numbers and the like what the effect this has on you utilitarian wise.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, it's comfortable because you can just
you turn it into
away.
A problem to solve.
Exactly, but you don't let yourself process very much, and you're like, well, I'm still feeling something. Why am I still feeling something? Well, because you didn't go through that process. And so that's like, so that was Faywin. So Faywin is a big character on that spectrum of like the intellectualization of problems and ways of suppressing yourself and stuff like that. And also some gender exploration stuff, very obviously, as she is trans.
Right.
So I take it from that approach. In fact, the Wilson family, Wilson's Wildlife, although that's not what this is about, I'm sorry.
It will be eventually.
They're very much, very explicitly parts of myself that I've put to paper and tried to explore, and I make them interact with each other as a form of both storytelling but also processing that I find very rewarding.
Yeah, it is very rewarding. I mean, like, I have certainly taken both, sort of both what Harry and you have mentioned here about creating characters, in both the utilitarian and the very extremely autobiographical, even if most of my characters don't look or sound anything like me and don't have histories like me. And, you know, some of my biggest characters are like, well, okay, this is, you know, she's a Romanian intellectual, and over here she's a, you know, she used to be living in Israel, okay, and then, you know, like, there's all these little aspects of me, and that's always been the case, where you just have like these little pieces that it's like, okay, well, I can't, not that I lived in Israel, but like, you know, all these different things that I identify with, but not entirely, because I don't just want to write me, mostly because I don't think I'm that interesting. But
I think all humans are extremely
no, of course,
Exactly.
I was just being ridiculous. But
I mean, I get it.
I do find that interesting aspect of like considering what that person is. That's the thing that I find the most rewarding about these, right? As much as the therapeutic aspect of writing is so useful and interesting, as much as I like the cleverness of solving the problem with, you know, I need a character to do this or whatever, the thing that really gets me going in terms of writing it is watching them bloom. You know, doing it even with characters that I didn't create, and developing them into actual people. Like, I can't I've even been writing Clef recently, and I can't even write him like a cardboard cutout. Like, I have to show him as an, you know, he is what he seems to be on the surface, but there's also so much more going on. And like, you know, I'm doing it with a Karcist from the Sarkic religion. Oh, they're also like scary prophet, you know, meat magicians. Yeah, but you know, he's a guy who likes Tom Baker suits, and he has, you know, a sense of humor. And like, even if it's not something super deep or super emotionally meaningful, like just even the slight character interactions and watching how, okay, well, you know, so when someone asks me, well, how would this character handle this? Most of the time, even if I haven't written about it, I know how to answer that question, because they completely live in my head. And I love that. I love watching them develop. And like, I recently, you know, someone had, I forgot what it was on Twitter, and they were talking about just doing one-off stories versus series. And I totally appreciate why people do both, but I rarely want to invest much time in a character that I'm not going to see grow. Because the first time I bring up a character, they're not nearly as interesting as the third time. Because they have reacted not just to the events in a story, but in my own head. Whether it's the things that I've done in my life, or experiences I've felt recently, or just, you know, what would this person feel like in that situation. And it's hard to, like, differentiate sometimes. Like, I realize none of these people are real, and yet they kind of are.
Yeah, the creating them as, like, even if they're one-off characters or very brief interactions, like feeling feeling the need or the want to add, likes Tom Baker suits, has a sense of humor. Like, you want to add humanizing aspects. Specifically for me, it's to make dialogue smooth. You can't have the dialogue, the like really intimate dialogue that I like writing, with any one participant in the conversation not being a full-ass human being.
Right.
Which is...
Yes, that's true.
Absolutely.
Of course, that's so true.
Even if
you
the...
can't... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Even if the one person is like the barista at the cafe that you're not going to see again.
Right, you can't have sparkling dialogue if somebody is a cardboard standee. It just doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, people are always kind of, not always, but I've talked to people a bunch through crit process, because I was on the Butterfly Squad for a long time, about how to make dialogue more believable. And it's like, listen, they can't all just sound like they're talking to the reader, because if that's what they're doing, that's not interesting. What's interesting is if these are real people. So just stop and either think about what this person is coming from, what's their motivations, or whatever, and then just kind of let it go. Like, just try to follow that path. It's amazing how often they develop into their own people on their own. Yeah, I'm the one who wrote them, or you're the one who wrote them, and, I'm the one who created Lucretia. Except for, like... And there's some weird way where you feel like you're tapping into something else where it develops on its own, like because of the events that you string out or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've put in your homework, if you've done your early work, if you've dwelt with them long enough and thought about them long enough and written them enough, eventually it should feel like you know what they're going to say next, or you know what they're going to do next, because they're in a scenario that you've designed and you know what its implications are, and they're in your head. So once you plunk them down, they tell you what they're going to say or do next, because they're characters. And that's when you know you've actually thought them through. You'll know what they'll do in any given situation, because they're kind of telling you, because again, they are aspects of your brain. They are aspects of not just your creativity, but your personality. They're all different little versions of you, and you know what these different versions of you will do in each situation if you've thought about them long enough.
Yeah. An example of that for myself was in my series Heka Countries, there's a kind of a main character, but not really. There's just several main characters, but the one I started with and the one I've written the most, I think, is Rebecca Douglas, who's a psychic and an investigator for the Foundation. But she keeps getting herself into situations where she's just kind of acting on instinct and like endangering people around her. Well, it gets to that point. And somebody had been reading through the series and leaving little bits of feedback, and they left on one of the more recent ones where she kind of goes over the line in some ways. I just really hate her. Like, I don't like the fact that she keeps taking these actions, and I weirdly found that complimentary, because it was like, I agree. I would like her to stop as well, but she has internalized the trauma. She has internalized the trauma along the way of the events that we've done, and I can't stop it now. She's out of control. You're right. She needs to stop.
Rebecca Douglas kills me live on air.
I completely agree. Making a good, dislikable character is its own reward.
Yeah, and not just because, like, they're evil, but, like, why did this person keep doing that? Well, she has problems.
Yeah.
She's not dealing with them well.
There's a, like, Gamers Against Weed is going to get a small mention later on in this podcast as well, but right now, that's me with a lot of the Gamers Against Weed characters. They're so dislikable, but also I love reading them.
I mean, you can have a dislikable character that's also compelling, right? I mean, and that's some of the best characters. Like, people didn't watch Breaking Bad because they liked Walter White. Walter White was an asshole.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Well, that's true. I didn't watch Breaking Bad.
Intelligent people didn't watch it because they liked Walter White.
He was very hard to like, and he wasn't even an anti-hero. It was just like, what a dick. But he was very compelling. Like, you couldn't take your eyes off him. That's partially the performance, but that wouldn't have been anywhere without a script that actually knew that this is a full character who is going through things and is reacting in ways that are human. And let's face it, we all know humans, they don't always act in the best way for a plot or for reality.
No.
They certainly don't always take the most emotionally healthy option. That wouldn't be interesting for fiction at all.
But then like contrast that with half of the villains in the Marvel movies, because the villains are almost always the solid rock bottom worst part of the movie because they're not fleshed out properly. So even like the best one, and I actually really like those movies. Most of their villains are kind of wasted screen time whenever they're on the screen because they didn't flesh them out enough beyond they're mad at the hero, which is almost always the excuse in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, that's, I would say,
Have a motivation.
not to get on a huge Marvel tangent, but that is the biggest flaw in most of those movies. Like, there's a lot of good stuff about those movies, and only occasionally is the good stuff the antagonist, which is a real weak spot for fiction, I think.
Right. You can't just make them be like the evil Dark Lord who's mad and is chaotic, unless you're a metaphysician.
But even he didn't really do that.
No, he didn't do that,
part.
but I'm saying he could, because anybody
could,
who writes
that's
Alagata
true.
could write an evil, chaotic, primordial deity, and it would be
that's
interesting.
true.
But most people, Johnny Coldpost is not going to write a fascinating villain whose thing is he is ultimate evil.
Johnny Coldpost.
I've just insulted
All right.
like thousands of people all at once, so that's a good point to move on.
I was just about to say, I've been searching for a segue for a hot second. I unfortunately did not find one, but I think Cold Post is as good as any. Because you know what looks like a Cold Post sometimes?
What?
Series 1!
Series 1.
Which is where Wondertainment starts.
Oh yeah, Wondertainment.
Yeah, we're going to go through kind of... Darkstuff's going to take us through kind of the history of the development on the wiki, which I'm really excited about. But before we get too far into that, I kind of wanted to read a little bit from the hub, because I thought... And you wrote the hub, right? Or at least it feels like you're writing.
I wrote the blurb that you're about to read, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because it certainly felt like the stuff I've read by you.
Thank you.
And I loved, it just starts off with the most fantastically point-blank statement. Wondertainment is a manufacturer of anomalous / magical children's toys. It's like, yeah, that's true. In reality, if the listeners are not that familiar with it, there's a lot more going on here. But some key concepts that are listed out on the hub is Wondertainment is a capitalist construct. Wondertainment makes children's toys. Wondertainment is childish and playful. Whether or not the previous bullet point is a facade is up for debate. Which I love so much. Like, just the immediate subversion, like, even within the list. Wondertainment Go ahead.
Sorry, I said it's important to the vibe.
No, totally.
That's it.
Dr. Wondertainment may be a company, it may be an individual, it may be an individual that runs a company. Most important, however, is that Dr. Wondertainment is magical and they make toys. Whether they be toys that aren't exactly safe, or toys that are beyond anything a kid could ever imagine, or want, the very basics of Wondertainment is that they make toys. Interpretations range from being warm-hearted and kind to either straight-up terrible or more than a little misguided. However their intentions / grasp on the world is perceived, they are inarguably tied to children and childlike behaviors. And this is, you say later on that it's inherently whimsy, and then the best line, I think, is, when whimsy goes wrong, it's still whimsy. Which I love. It's so evocative. And it really captures, I think, the best parts about this GOI. And so this is the part where I'm just going to turn it over to you. We'll interject, but you are kind of an expert. So before in the lead up to this recording, you kind of walked us through it, and I thought that's going to be a good segment of the show. So go for it.
All right, I am prepared. Okay, I will try to make this quick because I could make it really not quick, but I'm going to try to make this quick. All right. So, dang, I should have written down the date. But, sometime very early in the site's history, Wondertainment first appears on the site in SCP-445, written by Cryogen Chaos, which is called Super Paper.
I know what the date is.
Oh, do you want to tell us?
Yeah, it's March 3rd, 2009, so it's very early.
We are in the birth month of Wondertainment right now. March 3rd. We missed it by 10 days.
Oh man, we are really good at not quite getting it right.
We almost did Fifthism on the 4th episode. We didn't, but we almost did that.
But yeah, instead, what do? The 3 Moons Initiative? We never do this.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
3 moons on the 4th episode?
Yeah, well,
Oh, so close.
It's foreshadowing.
I see. All right. So Wondertainment first appears on the site in SCP-445 Super Paper, written by Cryogen Chaos. It's just some paper that you can fold, and it does magical things, and then there's a stamp of Dr. Wondertainment on it. First mention of Dr. Wondertainment on the site. Dr. Wondertainment exists on the site in little bits and pieces here and there over some articles, mainly in, what you would expect in some whimsical products that are sold to who knows who, for what real purpose, and then there's Dr. Wondertainment on them. And it is competing at that time on the site with another concept. Competing is an interesting word here, but we'll get to that. With The Factory, which is another manufacturer of anomalous products for unknown means. And Wondertainment, for a moment, is unsure of its character. Like Super Paper itself, I should have read it very recently, but from my memory, it doesn't even specifically mention anything about children. It's not it's kind of implied there's Wondertainment, there's whimsy, but children are not explicitly there. No. It's not a toy.
No, you can take the interpretation that this product would make the most sense as a children's project, but there is no explicit mentions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it doesn't have quite that character yet, but enter the Little Misters, which is a big crystallizing lore point for Dr. Wondertainment early in the site. SCP-909 was the first Little Mister. Wow, I wish that I remembered. That's either Mr. Forgetful or Mr. Lost. I think it's Mr. Forgetful.
Well, it kind of doesn't matter, but there's a reason for that. They were all posted in one great big article, right? And then they were actually cut off later.
Oh, were they?
This is
good.
This is Forgetful.
I know a thing.
Ooh.
Somebody mentioned it. Somebody mentioned it in the SCP Declassified Discord, and I'll be damned if I can remember who it is. So they get no credit.
Oh no!
But Salman Corbett posted the first 4 or 5 of these all at once in one article, and then I guess that didn't have the right reception, so he actually cut them into multiple articles. So if you look at the first iteration of one of them, you can actually see they were all there, and then later they were shuffled off, which is, I think you can kind of tell, knowing that in retrospect, because a lot of these are actually really short, these early Misters.
Yeah.
They're really short, and they all reference each other. It's very clear that they were written at the same time. And also, the first few that were put up were 909, 905, 913, 917, 920. It's oh, you clearly just took those slots. You were just
boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
You can tell because you look at the posting date, they're all on the 27th of whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Salman Corbett creates the Little Misters, and the Little Misters are anomalous humanoids that have these wacky, fun, anomalous abilities. Well, they're phrased like that, but actually they can be quite terrifying and quite unfortunate. And they all have a note on them. They have this matching tattoos, and they have a note on them that is collect all the Little Misters, they're a collectible. And then in the original, there was some manufacturer blacked out at the bottom. The very typical, I'm going to say Series 1. They exist elsewhere, but very Series 1.
Sure.
We just removed this information for who knows what reason. Dr. Blah or Mr. Blah. And then someone in the comments of one of those, I think it was 920 or 909, said, hey, it's kind of unfortunate that this manufacturer is blacked out, because we could totally continuously expand on this wacky, weird manufacturer. And Salman basically responded to that comment and said, hey, you know what? You're right. Let me go fish around. I think that I saw something that would fit here. And he goes and he fetches this name that's been popping up around the site. He goes and he's like, oh yeah, Dr. Wondertainment, and he slaps Dr. Wondertainment on the first Little Misters. And that spawns a big old thing, because now Wondertainment is selling collectible humanoid toys, very, very morally, I'm not even going to say morally ambiguous. Actually, I'm going to say morally black.
Yep.
Yeah, because they're not even toy size. They're mostly people. They're humanoid entities.
Even the nature
humanoid entities.
Even the nature of their existence is generally unpleasant. Never mind the fact they're being sold. The fact that they were being made is already bad.
Mm-hmm. And there's still this mystery, because usually the Foundation does not recover these Little Misters in someone's collection somewhere. They're out wandering or out doing something, they escaped or something like that. But they're out there in the world. They find them, and they all come with this note. And now Dr. Wondertainment has like this big air of mystery. It's very distinct from the factory. The factory has not made collectible human toys before, and people are really latching onto this name, especially as the little misters blow up. So there's this list, and only some of the misters on the list were filled in, but people love this idea, and they just start running with it. They start filling in the list. There's a great comment also by Salman Corbett that's like, I doubt the list's ever going to get full.
It is.
Which is hilarious
2 or 3
because
times over.
yeah, not only does the list get full, but we also make a separate, like canonically separate. It has different interpretations of the Little Misters, a tale series, also spearheaded by Salman Corbett. But there's plenty of collaborators here. Almost all of them are like really recognizable old guard names. Like Dr. Gears is in it. There's oh no, I'm sorry.
No, I've
Dr.
got
Gear-
them all. Yeah,
Yes.
I've got a bunch of these lists. There's like a who's who. Dr. Gears, Tanhoney, The Deadly Moose, Light, Famine Pulse, Troy L., Dr. Man, and a few others. Along with Salman Corbett doing several of them himself.
And
It's
all
a
of these
it's
are
like
making...
a murderer's row of authors. It's a great list of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're making main list articles, but they're also making this tale series. And then there's this Mr. Red, who becomes very important later. There's this Mr. Red who's discontinued on the list. Big mystery, what's happening here? And in the Tales of Mr. Collector, he seems to be kind of like a hitman-ish for Dr. Wondertainment. He goes and he recollects the escaped little misters. But that is not even the most prevalent interpretation of Mr. Red. He becomes quite a thing, and we'll get into that in a bit. Enter Dioric. So after the Wondertainment, like, crystallization with the Little Misters, first of all, there's a great long period concurrent with the Little Misters. We're making more toys. Like, there's plenty of other articles on the site, not going deep into Wondertainment lore, just realizing that Wondertainment makes toys for kids and sells them, and they're weird and potentially dangerous, and there's many, many articles like that. And Dioric enters, and he's a big author. He's a big name, and he decides that he's going to start making his own whole canon about a ton of stuff on the site, but Wondertainment enters the picture. And he asks, so previously, even in the Little Misters series, what Wondertainment is pretty obscured. Like, is it a company? Is it an individual? At very much the hub, is it an individual who runs a company? Like, how many people are part of this operation? Do they have a goal? Etc., etc. Dioric is like, I'm going to answer that question. And Dioric creates, firstly, the Cool War, but then the Adventures in Capitalism. And both of them feature Mr. Red. And Adventures in Capitalism is very much the Wondertainment line, and he answers the question with, Dr. Wondertainment is an individual who runs a company, but it's a line of them. It's a title that gets passed on. And furthermore, and here's where we get a bit wacky, the line is not just a line of people, it's a line of reincarnations of a primordial force called the Wonder Maker. And the Wonder Maker, potentially the person who gave humans fire. I think that's alluded to at one point. Yeah. Also, potentially Santa Claus. That comes up at one point. Might be Santa Claus. The Wonder Maker is this being of creativity. So it's this primordial force of creation versus, dun dun dun, the Scarlet King, a familiar face. Scarlet King, the primordial force of destruction. And Mr. Red is his reincarnation. And then you have, and this blows up on the site. I think the Adventures in Capitalism has something, it's a tale, and it has something like plus 300, plus 400. It is immensely popular. And
it's Dioric. Dioric has this ability to just
explode.
Yeah, you look at anything on the site, like any GOI or canon, and there's a 50-50 chance that Dioric just pumped that out at some point. That's why it exists.
Or or like stepped in to help flesh it out, and it's like his stamp is on so many things throughout, like all the way up to like series 3 and 4.
Yeah, the number of things originated by him is probably higher than anybody else.
Probably.
So his Wondertainment has a huge impact on the site. Unfortunately / fortunately, like, very neutral. The site is a collaborative project. People are free to reinterpret over and over and over again. So a lot of his specific details on what Wondertainment is get lost, but he does have a couple standout things that stick on the site. First of all, biggest one is people have decided that his most recent reincarnation of the Wondermaker, Isabel Helga Anastasia Parvati, Wondertainment, the 5th PhD, she is Wondertainment. People have decided. It's not every article, but if an article wants to name a Wondertainment, her name is Isabel.
Yeah.
And even when that Isabel isn't Dioric's Isabel, you know? Like, even when she's not a reincarnation of the Wondermaker, even when she's not versus the Scarlet King, it's Isabel. That's
even when she's not a completely insane goofball, which is Dioric's version.
People just decide this is the name of Wondertainment, this is the face of Wondertainment. So that really sticks. And the Wondermaker, yet again, even outside of Dioric's canon, Wondermaker, just as a word that is thrown around and as a primordial force, exists across the site also. You can find Wondermaker even without mentions of Wondertainment. As I said, there's an article that alludes to Wondermaker being Santa Claus, and I don't think that one is even Wondertainment related. It's just Wondermaker, because Wondermaker became its own thing. But it's tied in, so we want to include it. And that is really his impact, and then it becomes a big thing. Also with his Wondertainment becomes a bit more benevolent feeling. So previously, much like how it was a little like The Factory, there was maybe a sinister vibe to Wondertainment, especially, you know, when he makes the little misters, you know, sells humans for profit.
Yeah.
But Isabel's Wondertainment is for the people. Isabel's Wondertainment is to make people smile. Isabel's Wondertainment, as in Dioric's interpretation, is, you know, they want to bring light to people's lives and, you know, destroy an ancient evil. But that's pretty secondary, I guess.
If there's time, we'll destroy an ancient evil.
You know, if it fits in the profit margins.
Right.
So we get a lighter tinge to Wondertainment that I think continues pretty far, because Wondertainment, I think in the later series, in the more recent series, is generally portrayed as people who want to help, or people who are trying to make you smile and don't want to hurt you. And sometimes they fail at that, but they're portrayed as at least trying. They're definitely not trying to hurt children, first of all, or like they're not, I don't know, you know, you get what I mean. And then the next step in Wondertainment's lore on the site is unfortunately hard to expound upon without sounding a little self-serving.
But this is my favorite part.
I enter the site, and I, first of all, with Taylor and Zhang, I think is what her name was, created the Wondertainment Hub. And very strangely, the Wondertainment GOI did not have a hub for like ever. I don't know why. It was like it's one of the oldest GOIs on the site. GOC had a hub, Serpent's Hand had a sub, Sarcasm had a hub. There are all these hubs, and there's no Wondertainment hub. And so I look at that and I'm like, oh hey, I can easily contribute. Like, this isn't just something I want to write. This is like a thing people will use and is like, you know, part of the navigation of the site. I thought it was a really cool thing to tackle. I got some people in on it with me.
I'm very sympathetic of that.
Yeah, Grigori did the same thing with the Deva Hub not long ago.
Yeah, I heard about that. I think I should read it.
It's good.
Yeah.
I remember it looking really cool. I remember the visuals
I spent a
being
lot of
great.
time on it.
But so I do that, and that kind of symbolically ushers in my beginning to become the Wondertainment author. Because I noticed I had ideas, and I counted it, and I saw that Salman Corbett had the biggest number of Wondertainment tagged articles, and at one point I legitimately was like, I can do more than that.
It's good to set your sights to beat Salman Corbett. 'Cause he's really good, so that's good.
He is.
You didn't set yourself to beat like the number 2000 author or anything.
So I started writing Wondertainment, and I had some different ideas about it, but we're going to fast forward a bit because we're going to circle back to that, I think, near the end of the podcast with more self-pluggy things. Because much like how Dioric had some lore, but then some things really stuck and some other things, people could do without, or just don't have as much of a long-lasting effect. I'm going to go through what I believe are the biggest impacts that my Wondertainment writings have had on the site, which are, first of all, Isabel is not the only name Wondertainment has anymore. Isabel was the only name for a long time, but now I'm seeing Cornelius Blinarczyk. I'm mispronouncing that, but Chester Williams and Holly Light are three names that show up with some commonality.
Yeah, absolutely.
From frequency is the word I meant to say. And the other thing is Wonderworld TM. Actually, sorry, let me say that a bit more enthusiastically. Wonderworld TM, because the exclamation point is part of it.
The exclamation, and the trademark is corporate, so you can't add as much wonder when you say the trademark. Wonderworld trademark.
Trademark is never that sexy.
Wonderworld, and
Wonderworld.
People have really
Next
taken
hour
that.
Is just us doing that.
I'd be in love. People have taken that, and people have basically agreed that Wondertainment has an extra-dimensional base of operations called Wonderworld TM. And they have a Wonder Tower there, and there's like a whole population of anomalous individuals there, and it's kind of like a city theme park mix, with tourism being a big thing. And I've seen that mentioned plenty of places. So that and the sorry, my brain just exploded, I guess. That and the new names for all those Wonder Worlds. The names for Wondertainment. Also, and that pretty much brings us up to the modern day. I've also tried to continue on the line of portraying Wondertainment as a very warm-hearted company. They do actually want to help you. There's a lot of moral ambiguity that comes with being actually a company, period, but also an anomalous company that sells to children or gives to children or whatever they do. Also still a little mysterious what their business model is, but I've tried to continuously edge it in that direction, and I would like to, I realize I didn't put on this list, just two very brief bullet points of outside influences. So in this was all like the site history. I would also like to say, if you're thinking Wondertainment, you're also thinking Willy Wonka and Dr. Seuss.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Those are like primary sources for the vibe
and subverting the tones of those things in a lot of ways. Although it does fit very well with the 70s version of Willy Wonka.
Yes,
so much the book.
The darker version of Willy Wonka.
Yeah, there are quite a few moments. There are quite a few moments in Wondertainment that are reminiscent of the tunnel scene that traumatized a generation.
Yeah, I mean, like the only reason I still enjoy that film as an adult is it's not saccharine sweet. There are moments where Gene Wilder is very threatening in this weirdly lovable way. You can never quite decide if he wants to kill the children or not.
Yeah, one of Darkstuff's various Wondertainments, Cornelius, kind of looks like Willy Wonka started taking one of those gobstoppers or whatever that blew the kid up. He's like Willy Wonka who has expanded halfway and turned gray as opposed to blue.
You know, it's funny you talk about the business model of Wondertainment being a little bit unclear, but even if their motivations are clear, and the way that all of these different iterations in many ways kind of portrayed it from the earlier part, which was very mysterious, to the later part, which is more explicit. I mean, I think a lot of stuff is still mysterious, but there's a lot of lore now. It was very inspiring to me when I was doing Vikander need, because I was like, how does this work? How does a corporation work that's anomalous? And I kind of took little bits from this, which was, keep it mysterious and always be... The question in the back of your mind should always be, who is Wondertainment actually selling anything to? Like, who's buying this? We're going to talk about some of the articles, obviously, and some of them are like, who the fuck would buy that? Like, maybe the first rash of, Christmas presents would do all right. Here's this robot that talks. He has deadly weapons. Like, what, like, who is actually sitting there and go, how is there not, like, endless lawsuits? And I always
Little
find
Billy's
really
first
fun.
bazooka.
Right. And the mysterious aspect of that, of like the double, the mysterious aspect of who the hell is Wondertainment at the beginning, and now that there's so many versions, it can really feel like, oh well, it could still be any number of these. And then the alternate thing of like, how does this actually work as a business? It's very clear this is a corporation, okay. But like, how does it actually work? Well, I'm not gonna go through the spreadsheets. Because that's not
It
fun.
works on belief and hope and love and rainbows. Obviously.
And wonder!
Of course. Whimsy.
Never get that.
Am I too loud for the mic? Am I clipping?
No, it was perfect.
You're not clipping
Okay.
at all.
I was probably too loud for the mic and clipping, but that's
No.
okay because lo-fi is my style. This is intentional, folks. It's not just that my microphone is older than Darkstuff.
Oh my god. Is it?
God.
And
Is it?
not. It's not, but it
Okay.
could feasibly be.
It's
Well,
older
we're
than
gonna-
all the cells currently in my body, probably.
Almost certainly.
That's, yeah. So I thought we could talk about some of these specific articles like we do in most. But some of these are going to be, because this is so huge, like you mentioned, this goes...
It's massive.
It goes so far. If you look at the hub, there are dozens and dozens of articles, and so many of them are worth the time that it's impossible to do like a comprehensive survey. And so that's why I thought it was such a great thing that you were going to be able to run down sort of the bird's eye view of it on the site.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, it really is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And like I couldn't, it would have taken me a week of reading stuff to even come close to like summarizing that stuff, and you just knew that naturally because it's something you're so invested in. So it's awesome. So we're gonna hit a bunch of different random articles, some very old, some fairly new. We're gonna give you a chance to talk about your series. You've got 2 of them that deal with this stuff, and it would just be better for you just to kind of talk about it.
Thank you.
We're never
With your
gonna
fancy
have.
high-quality microphone
That's right. Yeah.
and your radio voice.
There's no way we're going to be able to cover everything, and some of these we're just going to do it like lightning round, where we're just going to be like, here's what the thing is. Like the Little Misters, we're not going to go in depth in all of them. We're not even going to mention all of them, but we're going to mention a bunch of them and just say, well, here's what they are, and then you should just go read to see how it's subverted.
Yeah.
But I thought, we could start off where everyone started, which is with Cryogen Chaos's SCP-445, which you mentioned, Dr. Wondertainment's super paper, and I thought I would just kind of read what it is.
Go for it.
Because I think it's still incredibly original, which is not something I always say when I'm talking about something that's so old on the site.
Yes.
SCP-445 consists of 3 stacks of white paper, 11 inches by 17 inches. Each individual leaf has the text Dr. Wondertainment's super paper stamped on the bottom left corner. While in its natural state, it cannot be torn or burned. Jesus. It cannot be torn or burned. Water has no adverse effect on it, and glue or tape will not stick to SCP-445. Observation of the anomaly has found that its fibers are much denser than normal paper fibers, and they go into this very serious one thing of saying, here's how much density it is. We're going to skip it. SCP-445 is folded into, when SCP-445 is folded into representation of an object, it takes on the qualities of the object in question. While in its folded state, it can only be unfolded into its original state by the person who did the original folding. It can also be rolled, and it will stick to itself if slight pressure is applied. Drawing on it does not produce any unusual effect, with the exception of any details illustrated. And then, like so many Series 1 articles, it just devolves into a series of test logs, where the Foundation researchers try a bunch of different shapes, and they're very fun.
And poking it with other SCPs.
Right, and then they end it
do.
with, like, let's do a cross test, which, you know, if you're a new fan, you might not know that it was a very traditional thing in the early days to do cross testing, where at the end of an article or somewhere in an article, they would say, okay, well, what would happen if we put this in the same room as the neckbreaker or, you know, the lizard or whatever. And they have additional testing revolves around a cross test where the anomaly and SCP-073, who are, after touching the paper, made it change color to slightly reddish tinge. And when folded into the different shapes, many times reflecting the shapes they had already tried, now the results are, like, very aggressive and or hostile and or, like, super dangerous. So if it's something as simple as putting it into the right shape and it being in the same room as something else anomalous, that can create something that is potentially a deadly weapon. We're, even from the first article, we're getting to this point where, like, even if it doesn't say it explicitly about that it's for children, the anomaly itself is so, you can fold into a paper airplane and it'll act like an airplane. Yeah, but if you do it right, then the airplane will shoot people.
It's a weird thing, and I really like it. I like the structure of the article because it's two tables. The first table is, here's all the crazy tests we did, and then the second one is, here's we redid all those tests, and they went bad. And they went
like,
bad
they just keep getting worse.
Because they had Kane touch the paper, and instead of withering, it turned into evil paper.
Evil paper.
Yeah, but I like that, like,
paper with demonic intent.
It's really fun when you see something that's been on the wiki for as long as this has, or any fiction really, and you look back the original inspirations for it, or the original, instance of it, and it always having at least the core concept at play. You know, I know we just talked about all the ways it's developed over the years, but, like, the core concept of maybe this isn't such a good idea, this is some magical whimsy, amazing Dr., like Willy Wonka stuff, and also it could be very dangerous, like, all kind of jumbled together from the very beginning. And then the other one, which I mentioned, which is, there's a lot in Series 1, and we'll cover some more, but the one that I first knew about was Robo Dude by Tanhony, who has been around forever and is just constantly an impact on the wiki, which is kind of amazing. I don't know if there's a lot of other Series 1 authors that are still contributing stuff.
Not a lot.
Yeah, definitely not. It's an exclusive group. And it really holds up, because it's just about a toy robot, but the toy robot, like all toy robots, has weapons, because that's what little boys and girls like to play with. Only those weapons, they're real.
They're fully functional.
Even though it's just a tiny little robot with a great picture of a toy robot toy. Toy robot toy. Anyway, and it's equipped with a fire drill, in parentheses, tested, functioned as a flamethrower. Energy laser, functional as a pistol. Boom ray, functioned as a rocket launcher. Meltotron 5000, sprayed acid at target. Ultra plasma rifle, functioned as an assault rifle.
Could a child ask for more?
Really?
No. Yeah, they could ask for a hydrogen cannon, which just functioned as a water gun, which is the best. Like, in the middle of it, they're just like, oh, it's just a water gun.
That's fantastic.
The next one's my favorite.
Yeah, it's very good. Bug spray, tested, released unidentified organisms that consumed the wooden target. It sprayed bugs. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And it already has an energy laser, but it also has a ray gun, which released a stream of gamma radiation. An atomic grenade, testing strictly forbidden.
I love that clinical little explanation that we got this far and went, you know what? No.
There's a limit. And what's really stand out, especially for Series 1, and I didn't, unfortunately, look into the history to see if it had been a later edition by Tanhony, but there's some really excellent, very brief dialogue here where a doctor is interviewing the robot, and the doctor says, "Hello, how are you?" And the robot is, "Robo Dude is functioning at full capacity, Robo Pal." And the doctor's, "That's nice. I'd just like to ask you a few questions. Where were you produced?" "Robo Dude is the intellectual property of Dr. Wondertainment." And it's just talking about itself in third person in the most deadly serious way. but it's a toy robot that also has deadly weapons.
Yeah, and it was like that from the start. I just checked, which tracks. This is how Tanhoney writes. So
Yeah, totally.
Is this the... I didn't check, but is this the first instance of Dr. Wondertainment being really anal about copyright protection? Because that has also been a very solid thread throughout all of Wondertainment.
I mean, I
Of
don't
just
know
like
if it was the first, but
trademarking and registering everything, intellectual property.
and also the divestment of responsibility if anything goes wrong onto the purchaser as opposed to Wondertainment. There's all those notes at the end for Wondertainment where they're like, "Hey, if this killed you, that's not my fault, man."
Yeah.
Or like, you shouldn't be testing it this way.
Yeah, cut it out, guys.
Yeah, I like Three Moons. There's a really fun trope in a lot of these articles where it ends with a note from Wondertainment to the Foundation, because somehow that whoever Wondertainment is, based on your headcanon, knows that the Foundation not only has it but has been testing it. And like sometimes it's really fun because it plays around with the idea of, oh, thanks for playtesting that for us, or actually this one's defective. You should return it at earliest moment.
That's much like I know this is actually, is it? One sec. I have lost it in the outline. I swear I saw it, but Shaggy Dreadlock's first article.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
it is on. We're gonna get absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's very much that.
Yes.
Like, thanks for testing our product. Now we can make a better one.
And
I
also,
really enjoy that voice though, because it merges the wonder with the corporate legalese, so
Yes.
it's simultaneously whimsy and also lawyer, and it can be a brilliant combination.
So you've already kind of introduced the Little Misters, and I thought we would just talk about some of the ones from the earlier and then some of the later renditions of them. And so for these first ones, these are all from Salma Corbett, and I think from what Harry said, I would assume most of them, if not all of them, were part of that original article that they
All these
split
ones
up.
we looked at were all posted at the same time in one article and then sequestered away into their own slots on the same on a different day, but all at once.
So I thought we could all just take a couple and read about them. So
For sure.
SCP-909, which you mentioned before, is Mr. Forgetful, and he's basically an amnesia person. And here's a quote: SCP-909 seems to be aware of his condition but cannot recall experiences past this, aside from memories gained due to the effects. So, just already the idea of this being a toy, and the only aspect of this toy is that it's alive and can't remember anything, is like weirdly upsetting.
It's very upsetting.
It's like, why was this created? Why would you torture someone's existence in this way? And why would anyone find that fun?
For fun and whimsy.
The description
For
of it,
childlike
though.
wonder.
I wrote this one down to use it for something later. It says if it experiences an event, he experiences an event, and then you go through this process and you read it back to him. He then can't forget it, but then everybody else who saw it happen does forget it. I'm like, they could use this to like fix veil breaks, couldn't they?
In a very unethical way, yeah.
Like if an alien invasion happened and everybody saw it, couldn't they just tell Mr. Forgetful about it and then everybody forgets they saw it?
The only issue there would be that then the Foundation would forget it. It would have
That's
to
true.
be such a high-profile thing, or like right in the middle, I guess, actually, to use this, but also accept that you're not going to know about it after you tell him either.
Yeah, it would also really blow the stakes of the story right out of the water, too, especially if you just brought this in out of nowhere to solve your problem.
I mean, it's not like that hasn't happened a bunch in different articles.
It's true. Maybe this is how Star Signals, the Silver Usher Fifthism thing, this is how they covered up that horrible book. They just they told Mr. I
Mr.
forget his
Forgetful.
name. I forget his name.
You forget his name?
Ah,
Well, this is just what we have looking forward for the next hour. So another one is
White people
905. That's right. 905, which is Mr. Chameleon, which is really fun because he doesn't change. He doesn't merge into the background. What he does is it's a sentient entity composed of photons in humanoid shape, and it can let go of photons in a consistent basis, such that he faintly disappears. Which again is like, why is that fun? Like, it's a great like thing in an SCP, but it's like, is this a toy? Like, and they all have this, and what's fun about all these articles is they all have links to each other, and the later ones, where it includes a list of all the little misters with a note. Wow, you've just found your own little mister. A limited edition collection from Dr. Wondertainment. Find them all and become, capitalized, Mr. Collector.
Right, and there's the list with the number of all the ones there, and it's a call to collaboration, which is what I really love about these.
Yeah,
it is a fantastic micro example of the intensely collaborative nature of the SCP Foundation. It is, gosh, sorry, I've had a frog in my throat for freaking like 20 minutes. It's just such a wonderful. It is all that wonder. It just catches in your throat, in a weird way. But that's the feeling. You go to Wonder World and people are like, "Sorry, I'm having a wonderful day."
Something weirdly dark about that. It's like something took them over. Like it's a coughing fit, and then their eyes start to shine slightly, and then they're like, "Oh, how wonderful!"
I mean, we'll talk about Vendafriend later. I mean, it is actually very difficult sometimes to read about Wonderworld and not think this is vaguely sinister. Which is part of the beauty of it. It's like, this is uncomfortably friendly.
And all of these fit because we've got 913, Mr. Hungry, and it's a man with an extremely fast metabolism. SCP-913 will enter into a trance state if not fed the specified amount of calories in a 2-hour period. While affected in this trance state, he will break down and ingest any solid matter within sight.
The article goes out of its way to tell you that he knows it's happening and he's not happy about it, but he can't stop.
So it's
Very
like
upsetting.
Existentially upsetting. Like it's not only from the idea that something like this exists, it's upsetting, like many of these are, it's upsetting because you then feel for this individual who has been created just for this purpose to suffer, essentially.
Here's our toy. We gave it a debilitating injury or condition, and that's it.
I also remember that Mr. Hungry either used to or does still have a very disturbing image on its. I thought so. Used to.
Yeah.
They,
I think licensing
was,
hit list caught it.
Yeah, there was some very, very unpleasant, semi-gore-ish thing on Mr. Hungry, just to hammer home the body horror of the whole process.
Oh,
The
Series
next two-
1. You are a thief. You are a thief from Google.
The next two are probably some of my favorites of the first Little Misters. So I'll
Go for it.
Mr. Moon and Mr. Lost are just such fun little concepts. So Mr. Moon, SCP-917, subject's facial features appear and to degenerate and regenerate in relation to the lunar cycle, completely disappearing during the new moon and normal during the full moon. Subject's ears, eyes, nose, and mouth will disappear, but facial wrinkles will remain. What a fun way to teach your child about the lunar cycles. You can see them shift in real time in this man's face who can explain it to you. How whimsical. How nice.
I just like the detail that their facial wrinkles remain.
What an educational affliction.
And Mr. Moon gets a great little interpretation in the Tales from Mr. Collector tale series that happened around the same time, where it does perhaps what you might expect, might reason out, that his facial features go to the actual moon, and when his facial features are taken from his face, he can look down on Earth, and he has this like super sight, and he's searching for things and cataloging things, and of course the Foundation has no way of knowing this, and so he's
cool.
very placid and calm, and then he's looking for things.
There's a really terrific illustration of Mr. Moon on the hub page for the Tales of Mr. Collector.
Yes, there is.
It's gorgeous.
There is. I
And
don't
creepy.
remember who did that.
I didn't look it up, unfortunately.
Well, luckily we have license boxes.
That's true.
We do. I was wondering because it doesn't really say so on the site.
It says it's by Famine.
Oh,
Is that possible?
wow.
Does Famine draw like this?
I don't know. I suppose that's something to put maybe in the description of this episode after we follow up.
Yeah.
All right. And then the next one, Mr. Lost. This I
it
think
is
this
Famine.
was.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes, I just checked the page. Salmon Corbett commissioned Famine Pulse to make it, so it is Famine.
Oh my
Nice.
god! I had no idea.
Yeah,
That's
me
great.
neither. I did not know that they were such an artiste.
He's a good character.
But SCP-920, Mr. Lost, I think this is the first Little Mr. I read, and probably one of the first articles I even read on the site, because
Nice.
Series 1 was some of the first stuff I read on the site. Mr. Lost, attempts at transporting SCP-920 to any destination will result in transporters becoming lost. Attempts at directing SCP-920 will result in it becoming lost. Following him will result in him and the follower becoming lost. Very straightforward,
Very
but
consistent.
very fun.
What a loser.
And I love the idea of like the Foundation continuously trying. What a loser. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Okay. The
This is
idea
what
of
I
the
bring. This is
Foundation-
why I'm here. To interrupt with pointless jokes.
Your contributions are immaculate. Thank you.
You will.
And
You lost your train of thought.
I don't think he's a loser. I think he's lost already. First of all.
Oh, what a loster.
Fantastic. I'm glad that we continued this joke.
Yes, me too. Not detracting at all.
I'm in physical pain.
I live for this.
I'm glad. But the idea of the SCP Foundation, like going and trying in vain to contain this man who just keeps wandering. And this is another thing. This was like how earlier I was talking about how like the Foundation doesn't even find these like in people's possession. Like Mr. Law, you can't even sell that. You can't
Right.
take him somewhere.
It's like a shell game because like you're supposed to be able to collect all of them. Well, you can't collect Mr. Lost.
Yeah. You can't. You physically can't. And I love this idea of like him being a thing that the Foundation runs into every once in a while. But when they run into him, they're like, some higher up is like, oh, that's SCP-920. It's like some lower dude is like, what do we do? Like, and just leave him be. What is he that dangerous?
He's
No.
just gonna get lost.
Yeah,
It'll be fine.
he's not that dangerous actually. We just literally can't do anything about it. He's just kind of a guy.
They caught him in one spot once, and they built a containment site around him, and then lost the site because nobody could find him.
I
Because it was-
couldn't find him. It's fantastic.
It's too bad they never made Mr. And Found, and they could have solved the whole problem.
Yeah, his gimmick is just a really fun image in my head, made immediately charming. He's probably one of the more charming ones, actually, less horrifying. He does still live a tortured existence of wandering forever.
Right, but it's like it's definitely more of a funny tortured existence.
It's a
Because
bit more
especially
comedic.
because when you think about the fact that this was like almost designed intentionally so that the Foundation could not possibly contain it. Like I just like Harry was just saying, I just love that bit when it's like, well, yeah, we did find him, we did build a thing around him, but we don't know where that is. Because he's Mr. Lost.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, so I would recommend looking at those. They're fun. There's also one that was fairly recently written, since it was rewritten, and it's of course Mr. Brass by Darkstuff.
What?
Yeah,
Crazy.
Yeah,
I think that's
got your own Mister.
SCP-629. I do. I was
is.
really excited to get that. I was very excited.
It's an epic tale.
It is.
Thank you.
Not a tale. It's a journey.
An epic story of angst and music.
Thank you. And perhaps we will get back to that after we go through the rest of the list, because I think that we should probably save all the self-pluggy
The best stuff.
nearer
yes.
to the end.
Yeah. So just
very
to kind of go
flattering.
through these a little
So
bit.
hey, are we actually ever gonna break, or are we just gonna keep going? Because I don't care either way. I'm just asking because some of you are old people.
Up to you. Do you want to take a break?
I'm fine. Doesn't matter. But whatever.
I am
Darkstuff, you
also
good?
all right.
Yeah. We're good.
Push through it.
So
No bathroom breaks, no food, no water.
Push
only
through the
podcast.
I mean, I brought water. I'm prepared.
No food. Excuse me.
That's not food. That's Coca-Cola.
This is all the food I need. Thank you.
It's calories. Isn't that the definition of food?
It's Coke Zero. There aren't even any calories.
Wow.
But there is caffeine.
It's
there is
matter.
caffeine.
Isn't that the definition of food?
There you go. As
no.
far as Mr. Hungry's concerned.
Ah, full
Segue.
circle.
There's no cannibalism on this show.
Explicit rule.
Yes.
It is.
So we've got a few more of these to kind of go through before we talk about the non-middle misters. But
All right, so
yeah,
next
there's
one is
lots
Mr.
of
Cannibal.
them. It's Mr. Life and Death, which appears to be a male of indeterminate ethnicity who undergoes the entire human life cycle within a 75-minute time frame. Which, if you want to talk about existential like horror, is do you want to see all the aspects of aging and decrepitude? And early development, and you want to see it very quickly right in front of your eyes? Mr. Life and Death is for you.
Yeah.
All you have
What
to do
a
is stick a
wonderful
key in his
learning
back.
opportunity.
They're also educational.
Yeah.
And that one's by... And
For
the ones we had
kids.
talked about before were all from Salman Corbett. This one's from a Dr. Fibble. And the next one, which is SCP-2396, which is really fun that you start to see that the list continued to get fleshed out, but like across series. It wasn't just in the beginning. Is Ms. Sweetie by Kinch the Knife Blade, who
I love
created
this one.
Gamers Against Weed.
This one's great. This one is full of so much like anger
lot.
at stereotypes and anger at
it's
like
good.
gender roles and just general anger, and it's prime Kinch. It's so good.
It's very good.
Kinch always brings a little bit of anger, and it's always good.
It's almost always funny, though.
Absolutely, Kinch is funny.
If not explicit funny, like there's always an aspect to it where you're like, oh, that's pretty clever. So this is an individual who's fueled by sugar, and while fueled with sugar, any male individual who's not currently the instance of the person being influenced by them, coming within 50 yards of her expresses a strong desire to leave and reorient their position as far away from the anomaly as possible. Male-identified individuals brought into direct contact with SCP-2396 undergo symptoms similar to a diabetic coma. The object claims that this is to keep nasty brothers and their friends away. But like the whole sugar and spice and everything nice is so good.
Yeah, and she turns men into candy golems. It's good.
It is very much about subverting the gender roles. Absolutely.
It is all about that.
And then there's Mr. Mad, which is SCP-2428. And the fun thing about this is not mad as in anger. This is mad as in insanity, because the anomaly is just a document that is a proof of purchase for Mr. Mad. But anyone who looks at the document will hallucinate a male humanoid in front of them, who then starts interacting with other hallucinations that they have, and it's unclear whether or not this is all aspects of the anomaly or if it's like inspiring general delusions.
Wow. I don't think I've ever read this one.
It's a Twisted Gears, right? Is that what you said?
It is Twisted Gears. Yeah,
I haven't read a lot of Twisted Gears, and I should, especially after I think Green Wolf told us that.
Yeah,
it's fired.
GW was
The holy shit, this one's good just because it's almost like Mr. Mad is you, really, because the actual Mr. is totally sane and normal. He's just an apparition who's probably not there, who interacts with your hallucinations and helps you with them. And it's like you buy Mr. Mad and you become Mr. Mad. It's a really good article.
And before we kind of, Harry, you're going to talk about the Little Seniors, which is a different rendition of some of these
Seniors,
ideas.
thank you very much.
Seniors.
Yes, you're right, Seniors.
They're not little seniors. This is not old people. We're not doing old people. Jeez.
I mean, we are doing that as well.
We're so old.
Tales of Mr. Collector, which you've mentioned, which is a hub, which we'll include that in the description, and people should just go and check out all these different alternative versions to these SCPs, like you said, that are tales about these individual little misters. And like we
With
said
the different
before,
interpretations as well.
Yeah, and like we said before, it's just like a who's who of early authors. But Harry, why don't you talk about the Little Seniors?
Well, they're the tiny seniors. I might have actually told you wrong originally, just because I'm an agent of chaos and not because I made a mistake, because I don't make mistakes. But anyway, the tiny
Professor Fantastic.
They're tiny seniors by Professor Fantastic, which is essentially a knockoff company of Dr. Wondertainment, but with the same sort of anomalous bent. The very first one, for a long while, no longer existed on the site, but now exists again as SCP-6310 by Jekyllid in its Senior Purple. Jekyllid deleted it and then brought it back this year. And Senior Purple is just a really garbage version of a Wondertainment Mister who just leaks purple ink. It's a very basic, simple premise, and the premise is basically the reader knows what the little misters are because they're super popular. So they see this and they go, "Oh, is this a little mister?" No, this is a tiny senior. It's garbage, and that's the whole shtick. And then a little while ago, Uncle Nicolini, one of the top-rated authors on the site, all-around cool individual who Darkstuff's worked with a lot.
Yes.
Wrote Senior Taste, which is SCP-5057, to reboot the tiny seniors. And Senior Taste is a clown who has toxic secretions on his skin, I believe.
Isn't it antifreeze because antifreeze tastes sweet?
Yes, that's it. I think that's it. You're right. And one of the characters describes him as, you're like if someone made a really shitty little mister. And that's kind of the mission statement of this. So it again has the big list of the different options, and you can fill it out. And a few of them have been filled out. Nicolini wrote another one. T. Staffer wrote one. And I'll do a very brief discursion here because my OCD, I have OCD, I'm not just saying that, is really pleased by this. 5057, Senior Taste, is the article immediately succeeding 5056, my first SCP. And in the Holiday Art Exchange, where we all do a Secret Santa, write each other something or draw each other art or something, I got Nicolini. So I did 6157 and I took Senior Fluff. Calibold, meanwhile, got me, and he wrote an SCP about my first SCP. I posted my art exchange at 6157, and Cal posted his at 6156. So my first SCP and Nico's Senior Taste are 5056 and 5057, and they're essentially sequels. Are 6156 and 6157, and the numerology of that just makes me feel so proud. It's baked right in there. It's a thing that happened, and no one can take it from me because they're all highly rated articles.
And we've talked about it. We talked about it a bunch with a bunch of these different concepts. How often that stuff plays into choosing which slot to put your article, whether it's the Deva, many of the articles reflecting 140, or Fifithism articles somehow using fives.
Yeah,
it's a fun thing to play around with,
and it's kind of neat in a lot of different ways. I mean, I'm friends with Placeholder McD partially because his like earliest successful article, Integer, is immediately before 5243, my first big article, and he started talking to me because he clicked the WikiWalk footer to the next article and read mine and went, "Ooh, I really like this," and that's why we are friends, because we had articles immediately adjacent to each other, which was kind of neat.
Wow, that's actually how the WikiWalk should work.
Yeah, it's right. I should tell the WikiWalk team that as like an advertisement. I made a really good friend because of your little footer with "Go to the next SCP" at the bottom that people say they don't click.
It's an endorsement.
It is. Anyway, the Tiny Seniors list is still more than half unfilled, so if you get the urge to write a really shitty little mister, go ahead and fire them in there. Anyway, 5057, Senior Taste, is a really good one. It also has an attached tale for people who feel really bad by the end, if they want to feel a little better.
Which I'll
anything
include
by
in the
Nico is
description
great
as well.
Yeah. So that's the Tiny Seniors.
And then Veraxis did sort of a new list, which mostly has not been filled out yet as well, but there are a few, and a couple of them I see retask some of the original Little Misters. But I really like this one because it's SCP-5760, Mr. Atonement. And just SCP-5760 is a mummified body located beneath Site-19 during discovered during expansion efforts. The nervous system of SCP-5760 is fully intact and functional. Brain scans taken of the anomaly show that despite its state, it is still fully conscious.
Nice.
So, Mr. Atonement is currently atoning for something horrible.
And it's not hard to figure out why if you read the article, because he sounds like the kind of person who has things to atone for. We'll just leave that out there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Veraxis's image, I've talked to them a bit about this series of misters, is kind of like wants it to be like an alternate Wondertainment seeping into this reality. Like, it's not really Wondertainment even. It's like a vestige. It's like an essence of Wondertainment that has somehow remained through all these, like, take your pick, reality reconstructions or or like dimension hopping or anything like that. And so you get this not even like very tangentially related to something else tangentially related to Wondertainment. So very much returning to the creepy aspects of the original Wondertainment.
Which is, very inherent to the original Little Misters, because we're laughing about them because they're quite clever. But when you read them, they're all pretty horrifying. Like you said, only Mr. Lost really feels like, it's not so bad. But they're all kind of bad for not only the individual, but often the people around them.
And so I think, actually, I'm putting this together just now, but Mr. Atonement is kind of an answer to why are we creating humanoids just to suffer, isn't it?
Maybe, yeah.
Exactly.
That might have been the whole
I hadn't ever considered that.
This is all a horrible punishment. And then that, I think, begs the question, who is Wondertainment again? Because it's like, what is this? Is this some cosmic punishment? That doesn't feel whimsical.
Wonder!
Wonder! You'll wonder how you ever made it out alive.
Yeah, it's like the way that awe means, like,
yes,
much more than it currently means. People say, "Oh, it's awesome," but that used to mean something very different.
Yeah, it used to mean it would literally instill you with awe, which generally meant is very bad.
Right. It's or certainly potentially
larger than
life changing, and not in just I got a new job.
Yes, nothing has suffered as much degradation over time as awe and as awesome and terrific. It means it's good. It's like, no, not really.
Terrific. It even has it's terrible. It's the first two syllables of
terror is right in there.
But that's that series of Misters started by Viraxis. But I think Viraxis has only actually written Mr. Atonement. I think all the rest, it's been very collaborative as per usual with the Mr. series.
Yeah, because often a lot of these will include a list at the end that kind of enumerates the different Misters or Tiny Seniors, and then leaves it open for other authors to fill in, which is great.
And I see that this is not included in the outline, and I see that there might be a reason for that, so I'll make it very brief. But there are the Gamers Against Weed Little Misters, which are the probably next most popular Little Misters series after the original Wondertainment Little Misters. They're not as related to Wondertainment as you might think, which is why we're not going to go super into them, but they're very fun and they're Little Misters inspired, and it's just kind of keeping the tradition of these very collaborative, let's make a list and fill in the list ideas that I just love.
And the GAW ones have like a bit of a fuck you-ism in them, right? Because they're GAW.
They are.
Yeah.
They're very much, a lot of them are fuck yous, and also some of them are pretty heartwarming, actually. But, cover the whole spectrum.
That kind of fits with GAW in general, which is why, the reason, like you kind of alluded to, the reason I left it off the list was kind of, well, we're going to cover GAW, and that's a whole topic to itself, and a wonderful one. But
I wanted to mention it.
Oh, totally, yeah, in its fitting place. And the next article we're going to talk about is not a Little Mister, but kind of fits in some ways in terms of the tone. In that SCP-4745, which was by Callie Bold, and it's entitled "Spooky Scary Snowman." Only in the article, this entity is called and is stamped, by Wondertainment, "Christmas Carl" by Dr. Wondertainment, who is a 1 meter tall plastic snowman figure that is animate, of course. And when his top hat is put on, and it is in someone's house or residence, they'll start decorating the house, but in Halloween theme, not Christmas. And
he's a little confused.
They will either make the decorations or repurpose things within the home, which I think is kind of just nebulous enough to be like potentially threatening.
Where'd the cat go?
Right. And after a week, because at first it starts out as very family friendly. After a week, the decorations go from family friendly to a more quote unquote disturbing motif, including the replacement of edible liquids with human blood, the generation of human corpses and body parts, just the generation of human corpses
and
body parts. And reports of frightening sounds and noises, which, yet again...
What a great cap-off after generating body parts.
This is something like, in past episodes we've talked about a few times.
And he screams sometimes. It's very terrifying.
There are body
it's unnerving, parts, downright.
You could potentially drink blood, but also there's some really bad noises.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think probably mentioned before, the TV trope is arson, murder, and jaywalking. Wait, one of these things is not quite on the same level as the other, and it's for humor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it works really well. But then, after 13 days in its active state, it will change the theme to just outright horror. And it's not even horror-themed. It's just like creating entities that are malevolent and becoming a threat to any humans in the altered dwelling. But then, after a while, they start... What? Oh, you said ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, it's Christmas. Jesus Christ, get with the theme.
And then it mentions that there's a document included with Christmas Carol that this is the holiday heroes and collect them all, and it was so clearly like it wasn't actually an attempt to restart a new Little Misters, because right afterwards it's made clear that actually these are defective and we've discontinued them. But it was a really fun transition. I thought that this is Christmas Carol who does things in Halloween theme and then just straight up makes a house hell.
That is fun.
Yeah, it's Callie. I think Cal is really underrated. He
absolutely
has written some really interesting and very whimsical, but oftentimes very horrific. Everyone should go look up his one about the cat.
Okay. Yeah. I
love that. It's really short too. It's
his very recent one with the demon baby is also absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And then we have SCP 3938, which Darkstuff, you mentioned in some of your notes that Baron Joe had helped out. Did you work with Baron Joe much when you were first kind of defining the Wondertainment stuff?
No, actually. I'm sorry it comes out this way, but help out wasn't really the word. Baron Joe he became a big Wondertainment author very much around the same time that I did, but he was hearkening a lot more back to the potentially threatening, kind of disturbing early Wondertainment. And I think I remember him explicitly saying in comments on a couple of my articles that he was like, I'm not really into the direction this is going. I'm going to write the Wondertainment that I remember. Something like that. But yeah, when I really started writing Wondertainment, it was me, Baron Joe, and then Nico, Uncle Nicolini, kind of got roped into it and then became a really big Wondertainment writer with me. And Uncle Nicolini and I were very much collaborative, and Baron Joe was interested in Wondertainment, writing other things, but very much in there. They were a Wondertainment.
Because this is a Dr. Wondertainment's Take You Anywhere machine, and it's an animate bicycle, because, yet again, things have to be animate, that when ridden by a person is capable of redacted speed kilometers per hour, which is just wait, how fast or slow? I guess this joke could work either way. Could it go? But sometimes it also leaves a trail of flames and plays the songs, either Speed Demon by Michael Jackson or Bad Out of Hell by Meatloaf on the radio speaker.
I couldn't stop hearing Bad Out of Hell the whole time I'm listening. The whole time I'm reading this article, I was hearing that incredibly epic song. It's yes, this is perfect.
It's also, it just includes this as an aside, it's also capable of flight to get over obstacles, or on request by the writer. The bike will often ask the writer where to go, it will going to go, and will take them there, but will sometimes refuse. And the example is, I can't take you to the moon, you don't have a spacesuit. Which is a paraphrase, but if being asked to take them somewhere, impossible, it won't just bring them somewhere they're going to die. And there's a note that says, "Oh, the places you'll go with Dr. Wondertainment's Take You Anywhere machine. Now you can go visit and learn from fun places old and far. You simply no longer need to see the world in only a book. So go and see any place, wherever, whenever, the past, the present, or future. You can do so via flight or on good old land." Wow! And there's a really good payoff that I don't want to give away.
You gotta read it.
Based on this note, that is like so clever.
I should go read it.
Yeah, go read it. Get out
I'll
of here.
do that. I'm gonna open it up, and I'm gonna do that after the place.
But you're gonna say you're gonna do it while we try.
No. The next one.
Yeah.
On our list is an 001. Wondertainment got an 001 proposal. Did y'all know that? Did everyone know that?
I did.
It's called The Toy Maker by Jim North, who I think hasn't written very many things. But one of their things that they've written, very ballsy, was to make The Toy Maker.
Yeah, it seemed fairly controversial in the early comments, but I think it's great. I think
It
it's
was.
terrific.
It was in the negatives for like a while, like not even just a little bit. Like it was solidly in the negatives, and then like flitting about between -2, +3, stuff like that. And then at some point, I don't know what happened, because from what I can tell, there weren't like any major edits or anything. People just decided, you know what? Actually, this is good shit.
Other than people saying, I don't love the idea of taking like prominent figures in the lore and just making them an 001, I can sort of understand that. But the angle on this, as long as this was what was originally seen, which is these offsets, is so smart and is such a great it's such a great way of tackling there is no canon for Wondertainment that I just can't imagine reading this and going, oh, this sucks. It's just fun.
It's so fun. It's basically, so from the origin of Wondertainment, there has always been this question, what is Wondertainment? Well, Jim North's 001 proposal says it's whatever you want it to be, because Wondertainment is all about whimsy and wonder, and as long as that exists, Wondertainment exists, baby. And it basically goes through different offsets of trying to explain what Wondertainment is, but each one is different, and then at the end it's like, no, wait, something's wrong here. Let's take this from the top one more time. And then I don't remember if it's immediately apparent or if it gets revealed through the article, but it's kind of like Wondertainment is talking to you.
Yeah.
It's not really an SCP so much as it is Wondertainment, the entity itself, as amorphous as it is portrayed in this article, very meta, being like, actually, I'm kind of all of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, like all of the best. So few of the 001s are like just a straight up SCP. Some of them are, and some of them are quite good at that. But a lot of them are like, well, how do we stand out? And this one does a great job of being like 8 different basic SCPs, where while it'll constantly break the fourth wall, like from the very beginning, I think it's talking to you directly.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the breaking in the clinical tone is great. It's kind of like what I was saying with those Wondertainment notes, where this is written as an SCP, and then suddenly it'll just start talking directly to you in a humorous tone, and it's like, that's weird. And that's one of the great things when you are able to write clinical tone correctly, is then when you break it, it's very effective, and it is here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jim North clearly did his research. He basically does kind of what we're doing with this podcast. He references many things across the Wondertainment lore, cross-links a bunch of like the most influential articles. He just name drops big lore here and there. And I don't remember if it was in chronological order. I think I probably read this proposal before I even knew what chronological order was.
I think it is.
So,
Isabel's
but he
one
basically,
of the later ones.
He basically writes up a fun little history of Wondertainment into an 001 proposal with SCP format and then humorous jabs and like all these little character moments like here and there. It's really fun.
Just
I recommend it to anyone.
Just a massive self-contradictions in the most amusing kind of way. It's really good.
Yeah. And I mean, the fourth wall breaks kind of like allow for that, because it's, you know, like you said, eventually it becomes clear that like, oh, actually, this isn't even an SCP. This is just the entity talking to me, or the cosmic force, or whatever.
Yeah, it's
The
aware that you're
Wondermaker,
reading.
perhaps.
It's aware that you're reading a 001 proposal, and it keeps going. Oh, this isn't cool enough for a 001, is it? Maybe I should ramp it up a little.
Yeah, I think on the first page I just read, it's like, oh, this is all nice and good, but 001 proposals are not built on nice and good. We need to think bigger. So it's very fun that way. But definitely playing with the format and playing with you along the way.
Yeah.
I think we've already pretty much touched on Adventures in Capitalism, but there's a lot there, and I brushed over it in our recap of the history and like how big of an impact it is. But it is, first of all, it's rather large. Dioric wrote, it's a series. It's a series, first of all. Dioric wrote it, intending it to be a big long tail series, and then he lost steam about halfway through, even maybe earlier. I think it was like 3 articles, and then he was like, I'm done. And then it still had a huge impact being an unfinished story, which is just speaks to the level of writing and popularity Dioric has. But then he later, much later, I think like years later, he came back and he wrote one article called The Real Adventures in Capitalism, which is a single article that covers the rest of it. And it's very fun. It's a little out of format because he writes it like a screenplay, and he goes over story beats, which is kind of fun. Like he's basically pitching you an outline of a story.
Yep.
Like, and this is where this soundtrack would play, and a huge fight happens. And Isabel is thrown aside, and we get this long shot on her, and like all this stuff, and it's very fun. Very much in the spirit of playfulness of Wondertainment, but it's also a huge lore dump. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of Wondermaker, a lot of Mr. Red, Scarlet King. Isabel has all these corgis. all of them named Jeremy. And her dad is a mysterious figure. He's the one who made the Little Misters. He's the one who made her, very literally, as a dad. But also made Mr. Red, so he makes the reincarnation of the Wondermaker and Scarlet King. Yada yada. It's a big thing.
It's good.
And I recommend it highly.
Same.
It's very goofy and very fun.
Absolutely is.
And then one of the ones that Eat recommended, I believe, or maybe it was somebody on Twitter, was SCP, which is more recent, SCP-6868, which is Bubbly Bobby the Rubber Ducky by T. Staffer and Cremo. And
is it T. Staffer? It's not Staffer?
I have no idea.
I've always, sorry, this is a
ask.
sidetrack, but I've always read it with the T silent, like it's Staffer.
That would make sense.
Staffer and Cremo.
I think the main thing we've discovered is that everybody disagrees on how everybody's username is spelled.
Yeah.
This is true.
Which is why I made mine a name, and people still are like, how do you say it? What? Come on. It's phonetic.
All 3 of us have actual names that can be easily spoken.
Have actual names.
Well,
that could be spoken easily. Is what,
I didn't, there was no comma. Where are you getting this pause? We have
none
names
of us
that
are
people
doctors.
can read and know how to pronounce.
I know, yeah. But
nobody's going to call you Darkstuff.
I hope they do.
This
now.
is true.
I hope they do now. So this is a sentient, inanimate rubber ducky that has refused all attempts at communication and is hopping away from any personnel attempting to come near it. And it's been determined that 6868 has hephaphobia, which is the fear of human contact or being touched. And SCP-6868 is able to transform liquid substances into purified water and pink soap bubbles. And then, and I'm not going to go into what the twist is, but it turns into a series of text messages between somebody who has received this package on their front doorstep and then their friend, and how that plays out. And for something that is really a very simple anomaly and also seemingly very playful, it takes some pretty surprising twists.
Yeah, it's a good article. It's got a couple pictures that really help elevate it as well. And also, I don't think they received it as a parcel. I think they're a parcel thief.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Maybe I misread it.
So
Anyway.
there's comeuppance involved as well. It's a good article. It's fun.
But to almost close this out, well, actually, why don't we do the lightning round first, and then we'll close out with your stuff.
Sure.
So, lightning round, where I just wanted to bring these up, which is SCP-1550, which is Dr. Wondertainment's custom pets. These are apparently artificial. Oh, and it's by Adam Henderson, which is like someone's actual name. Hopefully not their real one. Is an apparently artificial species of unknown classification whose larvae have the ability to undergo metamorphosis into a form which is adapted for their environment. However, despite adaptations, all specimens possess a tattoo-like set of markings on their underbelly reading blank, or data expunged, a Dr. Wondertainment trademark. Which is, it's really funny. It's really funny, and I feel like I even put in my notes. This is one to like point to someone if you ever see someone saying, "Oh, the wiki should just be horror." And then there's I feel like, actually I don't know because he redesigned all of them, but there's SCP-3301, which is by DJ Cactus, which is the Foundation, which is a Foundation themed board game, and is pretty good, and it turns out to be like it's essentially leaked to the Foundation, so the Foundation could playtest it for Dr. Wondertainment, which is very funny. And then Fridge Backpack, which is a fairly not recent article, but underrated. It is kind of rough because it's this person's first article, but it's SCP-4139. And I think the thing that really stands out is it's a refrigerator that comes with different pictures, like children's illustrations, that if you pin to the front of the refrigerator in different patterns has different anomalous effects. But they took the time to create images that show the different patterns. So in this table of test logs, they actually have an image, like a pictorial depiction of how you could, like, it's like a how-to manual on how to produce this stuff.
A how-to manual on how to fuck up your magic fridge.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, before we get into your stuff, as we mentioned earlier, which was Locke's first article, SCP-2923, X-Men Syndrome, which is such a good title, because there's, for years and years, it's been a discussion about, like, don't just write the X-Men as your SCP. And this is Locke's first article. It's really short, but it has one hell of a twist, and I just wanted to read a little bit of it. Which is SCP-2923 is a collection of protein bars, numbered 1 to 12, each of which produce a variety of anomalous effects in humans once consumed. The name Dr. Wondertainment's protein power-up bars, TM, are printed on the wrappers of each instance, along with a listed flavor. A short blurb advertising the item is located on the undersides of the wrappers. Dazzle your friends, frighten your enemies. With Wondertainment, 4 real superpowers are but a bite away. Now you can experience in the thrill of saving the day. 12 amazing flavors. 12 incredible powers. Wonder. And just proves, like, how much of a fucking powerhouse Locke has always been if this was their first article. Like, bravo. It's so good.
I would also, just really quick, as we said, lightning round. SCP-3301, one of my first Wondertainment articles I read, and I really liked it, and that's a lot where I get like a warm fuzzy vibes, because I remember it being pretty warm and fuzzy, because actually the board game is completely harmless.
Yeah.
And Wondertainment, like, wink wink nudge nudge, you get to play test it, and if you never release it back into the wild, then I guess we can't sell it. So basically they'd have to play test it forever, meaning that the Foundation employees are forced to just play a fun board game. Yeah. And I think that's great. I love that. I also think we would be remiss not to mention a fan favorite Wondertainment article, even though I didn't have a good place to mention it. SCP-111, the Dragon Snails.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Widely beloved.
Yes.
Widely beloved. I don't even have much to say on them. Go read it.
Yeah, it is. It's really
It's a Series 1 article. It takes about 2 minutes to read.
Yep. It's quick and it's worth it.
So,
Dragon Snails, SCP-111.
So we mentioned it earlier, but you've written a couple of series. One of it's just a canon, which is not even a series, but it's much bigger than that. But let's start with Vendafriend, which you had mentioned. you had mentioned in your notes that it's basically a way of downloading Wondertainment lore. So,
Yeah.
like, what did you mean?
It was.
Give us the elevator pitch.
So
Pretty
good.
much. So, I'm gonna try to be real fast. Well, the elevator pitch for Wondertainment, for Vendafriend, if I'm trying to like sell it as a thing you should read,
And you should read.
Yeah.
thank you, is I really wish I had prepared something. It's a story about the whimsy of Wondertainment meeting the real world, in the form of an employee of Wondertainment taking a vacation. And that's a very vague elevator pitch, but I think it's fun if you unravel it that way. Also, perhaps not for the faint of heart.
Which is surprising
there are some
because when you
gruesome
pull
moments.
up the hub and most of the articles, the theme is like very like approachably like pretty and like purple and like very friendly looking.
Oh, the Wondertainment theme is one of the most bright, peppy things on the site.
Some people think it looks ugly, and I can't even fault them, but I love it and will not change it for
I
anything.
love it. I think it's
It knows what it is, and it doesn't, it's not ashamed of it.
it adds. It adds to what
It
it's
does.
adding to.
Like, its tacky nature it's kind of part of it. But Vendafriend really, so my creative process behind Vendafriend, I'll be brief, I swear, is I looked at the Wondertainment on the site, and here's something hitherto unmentioned on this podcast. I didn't really like the Wondertainment lore on the site.
Yeah.
My main inspiration to start writing Wondertainment was I was like, I could recreate this in a way that I really enjoy. Because what I saw that there's a company that makes children's toys, and then a bunch of stuff was added to it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, where did the children's toys go?
Yes.
Like, we have all these
Yeah.
we have all these little misters, we have Wonder Maker, we have Scarlet King, which, by the way, I actually really love Adventures in Capitalism. I've come around to it, but when I first read it, I didn't, and this was when I was 15, so please forgive me. But like what I saw was like, it feels like we've moved very far from the core concept, and I wanted to return to the core concept. So very blatantly, the first tale of Vendafriend is called "We Just Make Toys," because I was like, I want to bring it back,
It's a
bring
mission
it back
statement.
to the toy making, and I want to make a story about making toys. I want to make lore around Wondertainment that is about the fact that it makes toys, because I didn't really understand what Isabel's Wondertainment's purpose was when she had like this huge other thing she's doing. She's defeating an ancient evil. Wondertainment's making toys doesn't even really come up. In fact, she leaves the company at one point, I think, because sales are bad.
That
go,
sounds
like,
very familiar, yeah.
To go on a
do
road
adventures.
trip in the Wondermobile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then everything goes horribly, horribly wrong. But so I was like, I want to bring it back to making toys. And I did. And then people liked it enough that it became a canon. And I didn't expect it to become a canon, but it did. And I was like, I'll do it. Sure. And that was the creation of the What a Wonderful World canon, so in Vendafriend, I was under the impression that I wasn't going to return to this, that I was going to write Vendafriend and then it was going to be done. So you'll read Vendafriend, and there's a lot of long asides about just world building with Wondertainment, because I had so many ideas and no organic ways to deliver them. Not the best pitch, I know, but,
But
it's
so
somewhat
well done.
justified.
It
It's
is
somewhat
so
justified
well
by
done.
the main character. He's very rambly. He's very, very rambly. That was one of my favorite things writing him, because I basically wrote the story stream of consciousness, because I wrote it from his perspective, and it's very just this and this and this, and then I'm thinking about this, and now we're talking about this, and now I'm thinking about this, and then like, oh, and now we're like 3 paragraphs deep into a thought, and then some real life thing brings him back to like actually talking about reality and thinking about what he's doing in the moment. And so we get a bunch of lore. Anyways, then people liked it enough, and I was like, damn, I'll make this canon, and I made it a canon. And the canon seems to be doing pretty well. It's mostly me. It's not,
That's all
there isn't
canons.
a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of canons, but I think particularly What a Wonderful World has been pretty much me and Uncle Nicolini. Which is, fine. I'm loving writing it, and I'm loving the bits of collaboration that come in.
I want to write more for it. I want to write more.
It does mean
I wrote one tale for it, and I had a lot of fun.
I really liked your tale for it.
And I wrote that because I really loved one of your tales that we're going to talk about before we leave.
Yes. But to go a bit deeper into... So, What a Wonderful World actually very much like... It basically followed the same progression as Wondertainment on the real site, or on the rest of the site, which is starting with a company that makes toys and then becoming something very, very, very different. In fact, the What a Wonderful World canon isn't even all about Wondertainment anymore. It just kind of kept expanding.
Yeah.
That's what good canons are about.
And now I've warmed up to like, oh yeah, okay. It's not like I see how Wondertainment became about destroying the Scarlet King, because guess what's happening in my story. So, Wondertainment is this company. It's founded by Chester Williams, who is this African-American man on the East Coast in Boston. And he founds a small business, and with Maria Herring, who is this magical little toy maker lady, and they start a company, and it's called, oh gosh, what's it called? It's Dr. Wondertainment's World of Whimsy, something like that. I think there's a couple more words in there. It's a lot of alliteration of W's.
Of course.
And it starts as this really, like, in the back alleys little place that you go, and children get lost, and they end up here, and they get a toy, and then they leave, and it's ooh. And then what ends up happening is...
How much of the wiki is summed up as, and then it's ooh.
Chester himself is not actually an anomalous individual. He's just a guy. Maria Herring is the real anomalous person, but Chester, through her, kind of... This isn't even... Most of this isn't even written. This is so in my head.
It's in the
also
hub
on the hub.
And stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Gets hooked into the anomalous world, which they have encounters with the Chicago Spirit, to name one, and they realize, Chester realizes and Maria realizes, like, you can't be anomalous and not be hunted, pretty much, by the Foundation, or the GOC, or any number of bigger powers with other agendas. And so they are like, oh, we got to be a bit more secretive, and so they hire an anomalous individual named Capital R, who makes a little back room for them. He's like, all right, you guys can hide all your magic stuff back here. It's this little door. It opens up. It's way bigger on the inside, and you can hide your stuff back here, and there's a magic lock and blah, blah, blah. And now you're good. And then they realize, oh, it's kind of safe to stay there, actually. Much safer, like when things are high alert, it's safe to stay in the extra dimensional space. And then they get more people who find them, anomalous people, and then it just sort of slowly grows and then kind of exponentially grows as they find their market, and they are housing more and more people, and they're like, oh, we got to expand this back room. We're like a refuge, kind of. And then it grows and grows and grows, and through a million magical hijinks, we end up with Wonderworld.
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 Trademark.
And one of my little lore points that I think is, I just find it a little silly and a little fun, I don't think it's mentioned anywhere, is that the original store does actually still exist and does lead to Wonderworld. It's not the only place that leads to Wonderworld, but it is out there, and so you can still find, through magical means, Dr. Wondertainment's World of Whimsy. It grows into Wonderworld. Chester dies, but Chester dies after Maria dies, who was to be his successor as Wondertainment, which leaves a little bit of a hole, and in his will he names another toy maker named Cornelius, and Cornelius takes over the company, and Cornelius is a disturbed individual who, this is kind of like where I get to put, like, if I want to reference Dark Wondertainment,
that's what I really like
in my
about
canon.
I like the way you did that.
Then Cornelius is the Wondertainment, the person named Wondertainment at the time that the weird stuff happened. In fact, he creates the Little Misters, who I have redesigned to be a children's band because I thought human trafficking was a bit too morally black. And so it was a lot more fun and morally gray to create humans to then perform, but they are still their own people. Like, they live in Wonderworld, they have freedoms, but they were still artificially created.
Right.
And so it's like this, and they and there's a lot of tension there, and tension that is released. But they're a children's band, but then they start releasing like more serious material, so they're like children, and then they go into, I don't know, it's fun. I thought it was a really fun concept. That's read SCP-629. That's basically my introduction into that idea.
I really like the way you did
Will
that
Misters.
because the way that you used Cornelius, who I like as a character, and I like the setting, and I like the way you handled him, period. But I like the fact
Thank
that
you.
also the way you used that as if all of this wacky giving bazookas to kids shit has to be part of this, it was probably him because he's a little screwed up.
Uh-huh.
I think the first thing I read by you was something about Cornelius wrapping up Wonderworld.
Yeah, this
sorry,
toy
spoilers.
facsimile of life.
Toy
But
Simulacrum of Life. I just Facsimile of Life. I really.
oh,
love
that was that one. And I remember, I think I even left a comment that I was like,
You did.
I don't know much about the lore here, and yet this was so compelling. Even though I'm coming in clearly at the later ends of a series of stories, and I was just like, I'm not saying it's near the end necessarily. I just mean that like clearly many things had happened before, and yet it didn't take away from my enjoyment of it at all. It was such a compelling character.
Yeah, these are the two tales by Darkstuff that I think are my two favorite things that were written about Wondertainment. And they're Cornelius the Collector, which is an introduction to how fucked up he is, and then Cornelius continues in this Toy Facsimile of Life, which is they're both just incredibly good tales. I really love them.
If you want a bit of a spoiler, I'm willing to give spoilers right now because I am. This is kind of a big conversation. Also, we want to do that, but I've hit a writer's block that I don't know when it will end, which is very unfortunate.
That happens.
So I don't know when I'm going to return to these things, but like, don't know when it ends. As in, like, it's been going on for a year or more, and I don't see the situations that are making it happen going away.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate. But that means that perhaps this is a moment where I get to, reveal some things a bit ahead of time, because who knows when I'm actually going to write them. The actual chronology of this Toy Facsimile of Life and Cornelius the Connector is reversed from what you would expect. Toy Facsimile of Life is one of the first chronological moments in the What a Wonderful World canon. And people should read it because I don't want... But it's all in the ending. The ending of it is really the moment of
Absolutely.
What a Wonderful World.
It's a whole
and then
Wham
Cornelius-
episode. It's just great.
Thank you. And then Cornelius the Collector is kind of the aftermath of the Cornelius we knew. But yeah, and then after Cornelius passes away, then Holly becomes the next Wondertainment, Holly Light. And she is the Wondertainment up until... This is the big... this is the next big Wondertainment thing in my canon is... Wondertainment basically cedes to the Foundation. In my SCP-445 was Wonder Paper. Well, SCP-445-X, which is an explained article, is my article depicting the transfer of power from Holly Light to her successor, Judy the Tongue, or Judy Papil. And that's when the idea of Wondertainment stopping most of its magical production and just becoming a more mundane company is kind of a big question of can you create a good company in an evil system?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The systems that we create, you can't be a rich CEO and not have evil under your foot, and that's
Right.
very much part of because of the system, and I represent the creators of the system, in this case extrapolated to global scales and with anomalies and magic. as the SCP Foundation, who corner a company that is trying to do only good into losing their trademark, their wonder, their joy, pretty much, like compromising to try to work within the system, because anything that they do to bring people light and joy is squashed by the system as is in the ways that they're doing it now. And Cornelius is very much like that as well. I have a line in Toy Facsimile of Life, which is like, I was so focused on the goal, I wasn't looking where I was stepping.
That's good. That's really good.
Because I think that's another thing. Wow, this is kind of a dark conversation, I'm sorry, but like at the upper echelons of managing a company, you don't know everything that's going on in the company,
Sure.
and a lot of the human element gets lost, and it's like you're probably not even aware. Like the people there aren't even aware of like all the ways in which things are being exploited and people are being pushed under.
Well, the people that run companies don't have any duty to their employees other than following specific laws. Their duties are to shareholders.
Yeah, it's
And
why
much misery. springing.
it's gross. Yeah.
Yep, and it's
even
this
in this
realization.
Yeah.
And it's this realization by Cornelius in this Toy Facsimile of Life that pushes him to do something drastic in order to try and change the direction of the company. That he wants to make an impression of goodness so big that people fall into it by accident.
I cannot recommend that enough. It's beautifully well written. It's fascinating. It's melancholic. It's packed full of world building, and it's just one of my favorite things on the site. I adore it.
And like I said, at the time that I'd read that, I had read almost nothing of Wondertainment in general, but certainly hadn't read anything of What a Wonderful World, the canon itself, or Darkstuff's stuff. And it didn't detract from my enjoyment of the article. It's actually...
No, you don't even need to know what's going on.
Right.
You just need to enjoy
it's very
it. Soak it in.
evocative and really good character stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And also, Harry has an article that also features Cornelius, which was the article he was referencing earlier, which is also fantastic. I love the interpretation.
Yeah, I just had to write something using Cornelius after I read Cornelius the Collector, and also when I sent you that to look over and see if it was all right, you sent me back this Toy Facsimile of Life as you were writing it for critting, and so we worked on that. And I was just amazed at how good it was, because our visions of the character were totally aligned. You knew what you were writing when you wrote your story, and I only knew what was written down, but apparently we vibed on the same level there, and I enjoyed it so much that's in a series I wrote of 19 tales with like a dozen GOIs in it, and it's easily my favorite one out of all 19, just because I really enjoyed Wondertainment. I think because reading these two articles by you, you're welcome, I think you made it one of my favorite GOIs, far and away.
I am very touched.
Good.
Well, on that note, let's segue into some emails here. Because this first email will do the opposite. Well, I mean, Boris means well, but Boris mentioned, unfortunately, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I don't really care much for the Dr. Wondertainment larger lore. I know a lot of the singular articles, and some of them are really good. Most are rather matte. But I never really got into the larger canon. If some crazy anomalous toy maker, what else is there to say? I'm eager for you to prove me wrong.
What else is there to say?
Hey, that's all we've said over and over again. For 2 hours, we've just been like anomalous toys, and then Wondertainment, TM, Wonderworld, TM, and that's all.
This was an unfortunately short podcast. There just wasn't much to say.
That's right.
Yeah, it's only 2.5 hours long. I would be more than happy to read the entirety of What a Wonderful World and then do a whole podcast on that.
Well, we're gonna get there. Once we start doing canons, that's definitely on the list, and we'll have you back
Damn
on.
right.
Woo.
And then Guari similarly says, I don't have much to say about it because while I've read a fair share of the stuff, I could not think of any article that quote-unquote must, but I'm looking forward to what articles you end up talking about. But the reason I included this, other than I like when people write us emails, is there's a fun question. And out of curiosity, I would be interested to know which canons are your favorites. Obviously without the ones we've created. And all three of us have been involved with creating several canons. So some of us included in our own canon. Because, as anyone who's read 6500, which created our new return canon, all three of us were on that team.
Yeah.
Yes.
That huge thing that we made.
Yeah, we made a
That
couple
was
of
fun.
cannons. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think each of us has been involved in making several cannons. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so what are our favorite ones that we didn't make? S&C
Right.
Plastics. Your turn.
That's it? That's all you're going to do? You're not going to sell
It's
it?
been a
Okay, S&C Plastics is my favorite canon on the site because it's simultaneously insane narrative wackery, not pataphysics really the way it's done on the site, but more as in this town narrative conventions rule your life. And if you say what could possibly go wrong, something will go wrong, and stuff like that. And there's a narrative nexus around the town, Sloth's Pit, Wisconsin, that wants interesting stories to happen. And there is a Foundation site, Site 87, situated in Sloth's Pit, and they try to control all of the insane wackiness going on in this town where local legends come true, and all of the more interesting, wacky things in small town life take on a new mystical dimension. And at the same time, the narrative force sort of works on them because the people who show up to work at Site 87 are more interesting, more humane, more likable people, to the point where Ip's version, this is Ip's canon, Ip's version of the Foundation at Site 87 ends up being more humane, likable, and interesting. And it had a big effect on me because of how much fun it is, how much it's like a high quality television show, almost like Twin Peaks. And that influenced the way I write in my canon. So I'm a huge fan of S&C Plastics. It's some of the best stuff on the site.
Yeah, it had a huge influence on me too, especially in the sense that once I knew I wanted to write about a specific site and populate that site with different characters.
Yeah.
Although I took a different sort of road, but in very many ways, it was like, well, I also want a group of memorable, interesting people that live and work together. Which before, I know Ip wasn't the primary motivator from the very beginning, but he's done so many, like 90% of the things are something he's either touched or inspired.
Yeah, I mean, to really clarify that, as he did, Jurek wrote Two Tales and dipped. and that's where S&C Plastics came from. Jurek wrote Two Tales and then dipped. And then Ip wrote everything else except for the things where people come in and join to make it into a canon.
Right.
So like 85-90% of it is Ip.
What about you,
It
Darkstuff?
is absolutely massive.
It is. It made
massive.
Ip the most prolific writer on the site, and it's all brilliant. It's so well written. The Jurek Tales are also both really well written, but they were more like, here's a slice of life of the Foundation, and they weren't about the wider thing. The wider thing was Ip coming in and going, well, what can I do with this? And then the two of them, I think, talking about it a lot, because I know Ip and Jurek talk to each other a lot and bounce ideas off of each other, which is where my 001 from a little while back with Ip came from. But yeah. Jurek is really good at setting the impetus for cannons. I think probably the father of half the cannons on the site in some sense. But yeah, S&C Plastics is almost entirely Ip at this point. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, it is extremely impressive just to even look at the hub.
Yeah.
But the cannons I would mention are, and this is not developed because I haven't actually read that many canons, and I totally should, but I haven't. But the ones that I've encountered that I am very interested by are Rat's Nest. First of all, is like a very old canon.
Hell yeah.
I think it's one of the first ones on the site, but it just and it's interesting to even call it a canon because it's not a canon. Like the canon. When people say canon, what they mean is like it's internally consistent. That's the idea. It's like there is no canon on the greater site. So when you want a canon, when you want to like know that this detail comes back or that it's consistent, and you like want to really sit down and world build in one spot, then you go and you found a canon, or you write for a canon, or you read a canon, or whatever. But Rat's Nest specifically isn't like that. It's here's an idea. Let's collect interpretations of this idea. It's basically a common theme, and there are plenty of ones which contradict each other or like have different origins for this thing. But the thing itself is the slow unspooling of the anomalous into the world, and like just basically entropy but faster, and magical. on Earth, and all this scrambling to try and stop it, and all the weird like body horror and colorful ways in which it just destroys everything, and then eventually, inevitably, the failure to stop it and the end of the universe, which is just,
well,
it's just cool.
The thing I really like about it is before we get to that point where the Foundation is mostly fallen apart and everything in existence is like anomalous, because Famine Pulse wrote, and I think it's kind of an open-ended series called Old Kansas Sector, which is just what if Mad Max meets, weird fiction meets Foundation stuff. It's so out there. It's so fun.
Yeah. And so I haven't even read very much Rat's Nest, but like when I think of canons that I like, Rat's Nest comes up. It's just it's evocative. I like it. There are 2 other canons. This is a little bit cheating because I've written for them, but I didn't found them, and I'm not the most prolific writer in them. But I would name Those Twisted Pines by Jacob Conwell. He's the main writer and the impetus behind Those Twisted Pines. It's another one that's set in a site with a cast of characters. I think that's a very common canon thing. Like the Antarctic Exchange is also like that. So it's set in Site 64, which is set in Oregon. And it's mostly about 3 Portlands, which is this extra-dimensional, weird city that like connects multiple Portlands. It's Portland, Oregon, and then the island of Portland in Britain, and there's a 3rd Portland, and I forget which Portland it is.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's Portland, Maine. It's fine. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Portland, Maine. Gotcha. And like it's a city that's like an amalgamation of all those cities, but it's not at all because it's completely its own thing. But it's very Pacific Northwest, at least in the vibe of Those Twisted Pines. It's very Pacific Northwest. It's all about that area because Site 64 is in Oregon. And it's like sci-fi magic. I forget. There's a word for that. There's a genre for that. Sci-fi fantasy, I guess. Where it's the anomalous, but it's the anomalous in robotics, in contraptions, specifically with Anderson Robotics, which is a GOI that if you're intending to cover every GOI, I'm certain will get its own podcast episode at some point. And that is pretty much Jacob Conwell's baby, is Those Twisted Pines and Anderson Robotics and the Foundation versus Anderson Robotics, and it's this big thing. And it's kind of concluded as far as I can tell. I've read almost all of it. Not all of it, but almost all of it. And it goes through a really clear arc. And Jacob Conwell has written the end of the arc. So if you want like a story that starts and ends and is really long and is really well written and is pretty actiony and very character based, read Those Twisted Pines.
Yeah, especially because
very cool.
the weird robots are not just robots. There's also like a very supernatural bent to the robots. Mm-hmm. Like there's like an element of like heaven and hell and like necromancy, but also there's robots. It's like whoa, this gets weird.
Yeah,
in the best way.
It's cool. It's really cool, and I've written for it a couple times in different scenarios. One scenario being Wilson's Wildlife Solutions. My baby GOI is set in Oregon, and so they've come into contact with Site 64. In fact, Site 64 features very prominently in Wilson's Wildlife lore, and so I've written some Wilson's Wildlife articles that are set in Those Twisted Pines. But I've also written completely not Wilson's Wildlife. I've written a couple Anderson Robotics things and 3 Portland's things. Anyways, Those Twisted Pines. This is a big. I'm iffy to even say it, but Dread and Circuses is fun. It has some morally ambiguous origins, like out of universe, which I don't think are damning. Like I don't think anyone is a bad guy in this scenario, but like there's some drama just to the canon existing
with a capital D.
Yeah. But it's like it is for Herman Fuller what A Wonderful World is for Wondertainment.
Right.
Yeah.
It's another like someone decided to do a big reinterpretation ish. Yeah, that's a big asterisk on that one. And they just were extremely inspired. It's Dr. Chandra's baby, and they went and went and went and went, and there's a lot of content. And it's not really story, it's very episodic, and it's not even all good. I'll put it out there, but some of it is really good. And it's like Harry Potter, the jelly beans, that like some of them are bad and some of them are good.
I know the name, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want to think about that anymore.
Okay, well, it's like that.
I just wanted to
It's
announce
like
that I have the knowledge because I'm a horrible gatekeeping ivory tower intellectual. I just want you all to know that I know this thing and I'm choosing not to help you understand it.
I feel like once an episode you have been like, I'm going to make this reference and not explain it.
Yeah, I'm mostly here so people know that I know things.
Great.
Well, okay. Well, let's let's close it. We're already at like 2.5 hours. So for myself, I also really, really appreciate S&C Plastics. It was a huge influence. Harry already covered why. All those things go for me as well. Rat's Nest, same. I've read at least all of Famine Pulse's stuff there, and think it's just kind of very strange and interesting to watch how the anomalous can just kind of explode all over a setting. For myself, to make something slightly more original, so I'm just copying both of you guys, I really, really enjoy Resurrection.
I thought you might say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really, really like Resurrection, not just because I've written like 12 things for it, but I also have read the entire thing. There are parts of it that don't hold up, I think, in the light of day, like not morally, but like there are some of the articles, like in any canon, where it's like, but overall, the thing that's always appealed to me in the SCP fiction is not just stuffy scientists researching something, but the idea of like the people who are anomalous and how they might experience things. And at the core of Resurrection, that's what that's about. It also is kind of fun James Bond storytelling in a lot of ways, which is what I've enjoyed writing for it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, you know, if anyone knows anything about me, I'm a big weeb and a big fan of kaiju. I think War on All Fronts is the fucking best. And from the moment War on All Fronts starts, okay, so, you know Godzilla? What if Godzilla had a baby with a crocodile? And what if that crocodile squid decided to destroy the ancient homeland of the elves? Okay, go read that. And then there's also Mecha. The Fae, you know. And then there's also Mecha, and there's also like other kaiju, and there's like deep-seated lore to it, but there's also like surface level, hey, did you like Godzilla when you were a kid? Read this shit. It's so fucking fun.
Yeah, it's SCP Pacific Rim. It's pretty great.
Yeah, but better than Pacific Rim.
Definitely better than Pacific Rim.
I don't think Pacific Rim's very good, sorry.
There go all the readers.
I think Pacific Rim is fun. It was fun. I don't need to own it. I don't need to watch it again, but I enjoyed watching it the one time.
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of a fan of any giant monsters, so I certainly didn't hate it, but like people were like obsessed with it, and I was like, guys, come on, let's go watch the classic Godzilla stuff. That shit's great. Anyway. All right, so let's get out of here. Let's all plug our Twitters real quick. If you want, you don't have to, Darkstuff. But the show's Twitter is SIMCEREAT. My personal Twitter is GRIGORIKARPIN.
And mine is at HARRYBLANKSCP. That was my Grigori impression from the earlier episodes.
You're an asshole.
I actually don't really have places you can find me, unfortunately, except for the
SCP
Wiki,
which we will include in the description a link to
Go
your
read
audio.
my stuff, maybe.
Do, and leave
I
comments.
also-
Darkstuff loves comments.
Yeah.
You need to have me back on the show at some point, only because I have an album coming out, but it's not out yet, and it would be a perfect to plug right here, except it doesn't exist yet.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Well, I want to have you back on if not for What a Wonderful World, then maybe for Wilson's. But yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep we talk. So just let me know when. And also, I know I've been listening in the background to your development over the last year of the album. So I definitely want to hear that when it comes out.
For sure.
we are one song away.
Awesome.
We are one song away from having an album. That doesn't mean it's going to come out immediately when that one song is done,
Yeah.
because then I have to figure out how I'm distributing it and a bunch of bullshit, honestly. But
Yay!
but
Life
I'm
in the
very,
creative
very,
world.
very excited, and I'm definitely going to be militant in my marketing once it does exist.
Right.
So please do allow me to be militant here again at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, otherwise, go see my author page. It'll be linked in the description of this. It's too many letters to spell out. So.
No, don't. We're gonna include them. All right. Well, I don't know what we're gonna do next week or this week. God, it's kind of weird because we waited so long to record this one, but we will be back soon enough. So bye.
Bye.
Trademark.
Wonder.
Wonder!